Okay, good afternoon and good morning to some. My name is Jeremy Blakeney. I'm with Qualsys. I am your host today, and I will be presenting this technical training for you through the World Wide Web. It's now just a few minutes after the hour. My apologies. We're just, delaying a little bit as there are still more people jumping on here at the last minute. Now, for those that have never joined our web trainings before, and for those that have, please remember you are all on mute. Therefore, you cannot talk to me. So I apologize. There are just too many people, and we would never get through the presentation with all of the questions. So feel free. There is, if you look at, well, you can probably see my screen right now, I believe. Nope, you can't see my screen. Guess what? Now you can. Okay, there you go. You should see your control panel through the GoToWebinar. And if you scroll down or look down a little bit, you can see a chat. Feel free to use the chat. We have, or I have, a few people on chat, Jason Horton and Kevin Woodworth, part of the TAM team as well at Qualsys, that will entertain your questions. So let's try and stump the chump today and see if they can answer everything you throw at them. So feel free, use that. Again, we're here for approximately 3 hours. That's what it's scheduled for. Maybe a little less, might be cutting it close, but we'll have a break or two in between, probably the top of each hour. So be sure you're sitting somewhere comfortable and grab some snacks. And we are going to kick off here in 2 seconds. So let me move some stuff around and show you a big screen. Okay, awesome. You should all see, and please, if you cannot hear me at any time or you cannot see the screen, please use the chat. Let Kevin or Jason know, as I won't, to be honest, be paying attention to the chat, as I won't be able to. So let them know, and they'll actually run over and tell me to change. So, so thank you everyone for hopping on today. It's actually been a little while since we've had one of these technical trainings. So good to see how many people are joining today. This is probably the first, or maybe one of the first, regarding the specific IQ Panel 2 Plus. Now there are some differences, of course, hence a different part number and name, and we'll talk about those today. Along with some things, again, if you've been here before, might be a little repetitive, but they're always good to hear again, and you'll probably take something away today that perhaps you did not know before. This is also based on our latest software version, 2.3.0. And so therefore, if you notice that you do have one of our panels and you are not seeing some of the features or different things that I'm talking about today on this training, then always rule of thumb, right, is update, make sure you are on the latest software version, and go from there. So this is all based on that 2.3.0 software version. Let us know if you need anything, again, whether it's some training material and so forth. We'll be happy to send things to you. So without further ado, let's kick off. So again, my name is Jeremy. I'm with Qualsys now, going on 5. This is my 5th year at Qualsys. I spent a lot of time in the field, traveling around both Canada and the US as a technician and so forth. I've been in a lot of attics and crawl spaces, just as many as of you have done. So hopefully we'll be able to, or I will be able to get through to you all today and teach you something that you may not already know. So the way the kind of flow today, we'll talk a little bit about kind of the overview, features and benefits and so forth of Qualsys, of the IQ Panel 2 Plus, and a little bit about our company, very briefly, I think most probably know who we are now. We've been around for a little while, and then we'll get into, as you can see on the page, more of the hardware, what makes the IQ panel what it is today, and we'll dive into some programming and kind of more technical aspects and features and tools and tests and so forth. So just to kick off, very briefly, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but for those that don't know, we are a Silicon Valley based company. We were founded in 2010, have a little bit of a different view and look on the security industry and what it has been and where it's been going, kind of where we want it to go. Therefore, we kind of think software first, and we leverage the hardware that we have to be able to do a lot of different things that are not traditional in the space of security today. And of course, as we move along into more smart home, we like to think that we are keeping up with technology and helping drive that space as well. So we're not a typical, behemoth of a manufacturing company that you may be used to, punching the same plastic for, 30 years and so forth. We like change and innovation, and to be able to keep up with what is out there to ultimately help you be able to compete and be able to offer your customers or your homeowners kind of what they would expect with the way that technology is going today. So a few people that make it possible for us, right, are Foxconn. They are one of the largest manufacturers in the world. They build every iPad, iPhone, Dell, Cisco, and so forth. So we use them as a manufacturer. Android plays a part as well. Our kind of backbone software stack is based on an Android operating system. Obviously there's always a question, can you play Angry Birds and is it open, and all these things? The answer obviously is no, right? This is a very locked down version of Android, very secure. And we actually don't do a whole lot other than it is an open source platform. So we get to reuse and tweak a lot of things that can cater to us more and be able to pull out some things through Android, like a video player or the text-to-speech engine, software updates like your phone would have and so forth. Just really ultimately gives us the flexibility to continue to innovate rather than having the same software or firmware, whatever is on a rubber button keypad these days, and that it stays the same forever, right? So that's not what we do. Alarm.com, of course, is the only back end that we support. And because of that, we are very deeply integrated with Alarm.com, and nearly everything you can do on the panel, aside from, of course, sticking it on the wall or remounting a sensor, you can pretty much do from Alarm.com. Even push those software updates or change the brightness or volume. So we have a very good relationship with Alarm.com. Lastly is Qualcomm. Qualcomm is again a big player and really defines our look and feel and provides us with the processing power and the size of our panel. It gives us that flexibility to be small, slim, and to have all the features that it does. Because Qualcomm, of course, being a mobile chipset provider, we get to leverage, again, a lot of things from them on one of their chipsets, a quad-core chipset being, LTE, and Android resides on the chipset as well, an Android version, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and so forth. So, and we'll get into kind of the hardware of it, in a few more slides here as well. So, really just everything that IQ Panel 2 and IQ Panel 2 Plus brings today that really makes it stand out from the rest and again, some of these slides, they'll be a little repetitive. We're going to go into them more in detail a little later. Again, this is kind of overview and stepping stone, but you can see even, all these pictures on the side of my screen here of the panel, those are not, of course, individual panels. However, they are the same panel with individual pages. We have the ability to basically dynamically change the pages based on what you have installed on that panel for that specific customer. So lights, as you can see, a light page, lock page, thermostat, and of course the security page. And there are a few more. But based on what they have and their configuration, will give them a different look and feel than perhaps their neighbor. Now, as I mentioned, all of these things help us down. It looks really great, of course, on the 7-inch touchscreen. It is HD. It is actually capacitive, and it is real glass. So not, kind of a plastic film over top of a glass screen that you still have to touch. They call it capacitive, but it's not actually capacitive. We've seen those around sometimes in cars. We originally had a resistive touchscreen, did away with that, of course, keeping up with the demand and what consumers expect, right? In the middle, you notice a black dot at the top. That is a panel camera. It is 5 megapixels. Of course, through Qualcomm, we have a much, much more powerful and better processor. Dual path, which of course is our communication, both Wi-Fi and LTE or cellular. Again, we'll dive into these a little more later. And then, of course, an ecosystem. Now with IQ Panel 2 Plus, our ecosystem has exploded. So whereas before we are 319.5, generically kind of, that's just, our base or standard, protocol that we use for communication with our sensors. And then, of course, Z-Wave Plus, right, and Bluetooth and so forth. But now with the IQ Panel 2 Plus, we just bring so much more to that ecosystem with supporting other frequencies, protocols, as well as, of course, PowerG, which I'm sure most of you are here to learn about today. So better connectivity, which kind of goes hand in hand with dual path, of course, better cellular radio, better Wi-Fi radio, and so forth. And then, of course, Android and just the ease of use. Now you can see kind of from this page, this is, security. I want to show you, this is basically how the IQ panel works today for those that have not seen, but it's just a very simple look and feel. It's really what your customers would expect, we hope, right? And of course, that's the goal, which is when someone thinks smart home today, they're not thinking rubber button keypad. They're thinking what they see on TV. Or they walk down the aisle of Best Buy, and there's now 4 aisles at Best Buy. That's touchscreens and smart home this and whatever. Or they have an app on their phone or their tablet. And so we do not want to, sell them quote unquote smart home and have it be something less than what they expect, right? And so that's the whole point of this. It's the gestures, it's the look and feel, it's the glass that really makes them feel like they are truly getting a smart home, and it is in line with what they have in their pocket or what they see elsewhere. So you can kind of see there's these different pages. You swipe left and right, and it essentially goes around in a circle. Therefore giving this appified look and feel, right, like your phone or tablet would. Now all of this we come together, and we don't, as I mentioned before, with our alarm.com partnership and just a relationship with them, we develop and move ahead. If you've noticed, even with supported items on alarm.com and through our website and our platform as well, we really stay in line and in tune with them and develop things at the same time. And for the most part, if they have something new, we have the same thing, and vice versa, because we want to keep hand in hand there. And one of those being the look and feel of our panel, right, in conjunction with alarm.com. We don't want the watch, as you can see on the page, the watch, the phone, and the tablet to have their own look and feel, because that's alarm.com. They manage that, and then the panel be a completely different experience. So now you kind of have this customer confusion, if you will, with, they're so used to using it on their phone, and they come back home, they don't have, they have to punch it into the screen, and they don't know where something is, or it's different than what they're accustomed to. So we really try to keep this consistent experience across all platforms in line with alarm.com to an extent, right? To therefore make it more simple to that homeowner to move across platforms and not have to relearn and relearn and relearn where different icons or buttons or what they may look like. Now, diving into a bit of, as we're talking what makes IQ Panel, this is largely a part of it, of course, as I mentioned before, which is the Qualcomm chipset. This is, as you can see, an actual picture that we took, and it is the inside of the panel. For those that have not seen, on the right-hand side, it's all blank, and that's pretty accurate as far as the only thing that sits on the right side of the panel is a battery and a Siren, pretty much. So not a whole lot there. The rest of the panel really resides, well, it does reside on this one, as you can see, silicon board right here. And we'll talk about a few things. You can see, of course, the terminal board and some plugs and so forth. But this is what Qualcomm really brings to us. And you can see on the left side of the screen, they being a mobile chipset provider, and SoC standing for system on a chip, for those that may have a smartwatch or so forth, really is a computer on a small chip that is essentially this glorified cell phone or tablet that we then created and added the ability to have the security and automation or smart home offerings, right? So without ever having to go through distribution, buying a panel, and then, of course, walking down the rest of the aisle and having to pick out the right cellular radio and the right Z-Wave card and the right Wi-Fi card, or whatever it may be. It is all there. It is all built in the panel. You actually can't remove the cellular radio. As you can see on the screen, there's a SIM card tray on the left-hand side. So it is part of the board, just like your cell phone is, right? So just like your phone is that, and to rebuttal who may have a question already typing in, what happens if et cetera, goes bad? Do I have to replace a whole panel and so forth? To speak to that, how often do you have to return a cell phone for a bad quote unquote cellular radio, right? The question is, really don't have to, and I'm sure there may be a few that had an issue at one point, but really the percentage is so extremely low because it is built as one, right? It's not a panel and then there is another manufacturer or another part that then would have its own related quality control and so forth. And it is very common, or has been very common in the industry, to have, unfortunately, a legitimate bad radio that you then return and you slide in a new one, and of course that next one works, right? That just does not exist with our platform, being that it literally is a mobile chipset working as one piece, not as a side piece that you then mate together after the fact. It is, of course, 4G LTE, which stands for long-term evolution. There are different flavors. We'll talk about that for different carriers. Qualcomm also brings Wi-Fi 802.11, AC. That's support for both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. Bluetooth, low energy as well, which we'll dive into for some features and disarming. And then, of course, an access point. So similar to your phone that may have a hotspot that you can enable and therefore then broadcast an SSID. We have that ability as well, which we'll get into. And of course, lastly, Android that kind of pulls everything together and allows us to talk to all of this hardware, right? Now, all the Qualcomm stuff aside, as you can see, we've had to create and make this mobile chipset a security and smart home offering, right? Obviously, my cell phone can't talk to a 319 or a PowerG sensor or a Z-Wave device and so forth. So we've had to add a few things. Of course, one being now IQ Panel 2 Plus, okay, PowerG. Now, just for those on here, again, there were some sleeves of panels that were quote unquote PowerG ready. So don't be confused. IQ Panel 2, simply IQ Panel 2 is not or does not come with the PowerG radio inside. It must be an IQ Panel 2 Plus. And really the biggest differentiator is that the IQ Panel 2 is the entire thing is pretty much a gold box, where the 2 Plus you will see a gray box, and I'll show you again coming out here, a gray box with a different color ring or ribbon around it, if you will. Now, also, you probably won't see as many IQ Panel 2s. Everything has moved to the 2 Plus, so your distributor may still have a few lingering here and there of the classic IQ Panel 2 in the gold box. However, everything is moving right to IQ Panel 2 Plus to offer you that technology always. So PowerG, and we'll get into PowerG in a little bit. Of course, for those that know, it is a technology that is owned and a part of DSC. We have a relationship with DSC, and therefore we get to leverage their help, of course, as well as some of the technology that they currently have, being PowerG. Now, this is typically used on a Neo panel or the IOTEGA. However, now you can use it on a Qualcomm panel, which is awesome. So IQ Panel 2 Plus comes standard with PowerG. We don't profess to have the insane, typical range that PowerG is rated for when you look at a Neo panel. That, of course, is its own thing. We're not getting 1.2 miles open air. However, you will get 4 times or more the range of your current sensor, and you'll get somewhere mid 2,500 to close to 3,000 feet open air on a nice pretty day with PowerG and our panel. So keep that in mind. Right now we do support the repeaters and a whole list. We'll talk about that, but it is a 2-way military grade encryption. Right, it's 128-bit AES, like banking level encryption. They use it everywhere. You'd actually be surprised how many big stores, box stores, whether it be Walmart or Home Depot or even an AMC theater that you'll walk into. And of course, being security people, it's just some weird little quirky thing that we do. We see a motion detector up in the corner and we think to ourselves, ha, I know what that is. That's an Aurora motion detector, and it's probably got a Honeywell Vista panel on the other side, or whatever, right? Because we're all nerds, of course, and we love our jobs, of course. So you'd be surprised actually how many stores and warehouses and things out there are actually PowerG and all wireless, which is very awesome. So now we're bringing this platform to you to then be able to assist you and afford you to install one platform in so many different variations, whether it be small commercial to medium commercial and warehouses, along with, of course, multi-level and much larger homes than our typical range would not permit us to, and so forth, right? And of course, the encryption and the 50-channel frequency hopping ability and power management and so forth. So just really great technology. The other is security RF. So this is another big difference with IQ Panel 2 Plus. So one, you get PowerG. Two, there are different SKUs. So there's this bottom card, and that today is our traditional card is 319.5, right? So we work on the Interlogix GE frequency. So anything wireless, for the most part, that is 319.5 will natively pair to the panel, unless you have a different panel type. Remember, I mentioned the different color ribbons or rings around the panel box that will tell you which card, which security RF card is in the panel. So we'll get into that here in a minute or two. But we support 128 zones or sensors, meaning that these will be shared across both platforms, the PowerG and the legacy security RF card. So you can mix and match. The nice thing is, as a technician, you can tell on alarm.com, you can tell on the panel, you can tell which frequency that sensor is reporting on, whether it's PowerG or 345 or whatever it may be. Whereas the customer or the homeowner cannot tell the difference. They will simply see front door, back door, garage door, living room motion detector, and those may be a whole slew of different protocols or frequency types, right? So to them, it's very, very simple and it doesn't interfere with them. The other is Z-Wave Plus. We support 130 Z-Wave Plus devices. And that, of course, is a whole range of lights, locks, thermostats, water shutoff valves, sirens, and the whole bit. So 137 devices. And we'll get into Z-Wave more as well. Now, image sensor, you can use, technically you can use an image sensor. If you notice my screen, the image sensor, a little highlighted perforated line, blinked a few times, and then the PowerG faded away. The reason being is that the alarm.com image sensor, which we technically support 5 of, is also of a 900 megahertz frequency, similar to PowerG. Now, we have a 900 megahertz frequency antenna in the panel that is not hanging out the back like the other of course, security radios. But you're picking and choosing, right? So if you want PowerG, then the antenna is going to be attached to your PowerG card because it is of a 900 megahertz frequency. Otherwise, if you want image sensor and you don't want PowerG, you would then need to install the image sensor card, as that does not come standard. Okay, that is a separate part, and you would have to attach that the antenna down onto the image sensor card. So one or the other. Now, there is some bouncing back and forth and working with alarm.com to potentially have another solution with a card that has an antenna raised off the board. That's been talked about. I don't have any sort of status on that. However, PowerG has their own, right? So now it's not as small as the alarm.com image sensor. However, there are also trade-offs, right? You have an indoor and an outdoor version. It is a bit bigger. You can today, if you set up one of the PowerG image motions or image viewers, oops, that was supposed to happen. Or image viewer, it will snap a picture on alarm and it will send it to alarm.com. The PowerG image viewer will actually take 10 photos, stitch them together, and you'll have that little video clip and it will stay on the panel locally. However, one of those images gets sent to alarm.com as the alarm image. Now, we are working more, and roadmap is for that device, the PowerG image viewers, to have more likeness to the alarm.com image sensor. Therefore, you will shortly be able to peek in and peek in next motion and so forth. You get better battery life, and then of course the range, right? It's all about the range. So you get phenomenal range, and you get an outdoor image viewer as well. The image, personally, I'm not sure the quality. Alarm.com may have a little bit better, but I think it's pretty comparable. So there you go. So you cannot have an image sensor and PowerG at the same time, okay, and an alarm.com image sensor. So just remember that. And if you ask yourself why, well, that is why. So you'll need to move the antenna off of one and put it onto the other. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, just the 3 boxes. There is a panel for every situation, right? So no matter what home you go into, for the most part, or the majority of the homes that you were to go into, if they have something that is existing, you or we have something for that, right? So you can see on the left, we have the gold version. Still has a gold ring. That is, of course, our IQ Panel 2 Plus standard with 319 radio, right? That supports all Qualsys and S-line Qualsys sensors, along with the Interlogix line of sensors. And you can see the different part numbers. So these are the different cellular carriers that we support. In the US, of course, Verizon and AT&T. And in Canada, we have TELUS. The second one is a gray box with a gray ring, which is, as you can see, 2 gig Honeywell support, so 345. So therefore, you do not get both, right? So you're picking one or the other. You're not having and. So each one of these is its own dedicated security radio, 345 or 319, or as you can see in the end, 433. So when you go into a home, you can reuse those existing Honeywell or those DSC contacts if you want to add more, right? You've taken everything over and, hey, customer, I'm going to add something else, of course, as that is what they want. You would either then need to install something on that same frequency. If you have a Honeywell sensor kicking around, you can put that Honeywell sensor in. However, every single one of these panels, as I mentioned, IQ Panel 2 Plus comes standard with PowerG. So for the extra sensors that they would want, you can then put in, of course, PowerG. And what are the benefits of PowerG? Well, we just talked about that, right? Range is a big one. Security, as in the encryption, and the power management, and so forth and so forth. So battery life. So very, very beneficial to put in PowerG, right, as that add-on sensor. Now, some things, of course, that we've added over time through software updates and have been able to bring all these features to you all are, as you can see on the screen, right? We have some Bluetooth disarming, of course, in the first left pane, and we'll dive into each one of these as well. You can see someone answering the doorbell, the Skybell from the screen, and getting a message on the watch. Viewing the alarm.com cameras on your table, built-in glass break detector, and of course a picture frame, right? So we'll dive into these kind of one-on-one here shortly. So as we mentioned before, the range and so forth with PowerG, just a real big step up from our traditional legacy radios, right? We're really trying to bring something that you have all requested or that you all want as installers and integrators and so forth, which is not having to fork out the extra change for translators and repeaters and so forth, but being able to offer all of that in one package for you, essentially, right? So you're already always going to have to buy a panel. You don't always have to buy a repeater, and you don't always have to buy a translator, right? You can buy the panel that suits the sensors already existing in that home. And for the sensor that's just a little further away, that may be in the garage or the detached garage or the shop or maybe a gate or driveway, or something, you can then, of course, add PowerG, right? So now the other is, when we started talking PowerG, it was only a matter of time before we would start having the ask, well, what about partitions, right? Partitions and therefore getting into more of a commercial mindset as well, or small business, right? So being able to offer that, again, all in one package is very big. Not having to go with a standard hardwired panel, but being able to use PowerG, and then therefore, of course, adding partitions, which we have, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 partitions, again, 2.3.0 brings this. So if you're not on 2.3.0, update, right? Get 2.3.0. Screen lock ability to where, of course, if you're in the commercial setting, that your panel is not always open and people can come and go and unlock and lock things and mess around. So you therefore need a code to enter the panel even. Access control through alarm.com, which of course we support through the alarm.com platform. And then of course the disarm photos, right? So not only being able to get a message on your phone that so-and-so armed the system or disarmed the system when they came into work this morning, but actually being able to get a photo of that person, right? And knowing who that person is. As you can see, we do have 4 different partitions. So you're able to have not only partitions, but also secondary points of access through a remote keypad or a PowerG keypad as well. So you can see 2 ones. For example, I can have the same, partition 1 actually have a separate secondary keypad, right, to disarm a certain part. And then, of course, in different areas of my building or even my home, mother-in-law suite, and so forth, you'd be able to use those partitions and a separate keypad for partition 1. So, and we'll get into that a little more as well, right? So, excuse me. We are UL or do have UL 1610, so therefore you'll be able to put a UL rated security system standalone without a big metal box in the closet, being the IQ panel in a type of space that will require that certification. We, of course, with PowerG also support 8 repeaters. So therefore, you are able to then really extend the range and be able to provide what your customer needs and at an affordable price, right? You're not spending hours and hours and hours and possibly days running wire, right? Running cable. So this is commercial Berg wireless. Of course, PowerG works just about everywhere, and if not, throw a repeater in. Their repeaters will not repeat each other, as a quick note. So you cannot take a repeater and then extend the repeater's range with another repeater and end up, 20 miles away or something, right? This is more of a star pattern, put something in the middle, and get all those sensors to come back to this middle point being your panel, right, and its receiver. So excuse me. Live answer on panel is another big one. It's probably the most requested, even more so than what partitions was, which was being able to answer the video doorbell from your panel. So that is available. That's been available for a little while now, but being able to have Skybell and the alarm.com cameras on the panel to be able to answer, dismiss, and of course lock and unlock the door or talk back and forth, leave your package and so forth. Not only for just the convenience, but also if you actually think about, I work a lot with the wellness side of alarm.com and being able to offer this sort of thing to as we say, aging in place or an elder person that spends a lot of time at home, to give them the convenience of being able to see who's at the door without having to get up and walk over there, or maybe it's in the middle of the night, or who knows, is not only convenient but a lot more safe for that person than to be getting up and doing a lot of walking that may not otherwise be able to, right? So just awesome feature on the panel. Live view, of course. You can see the different models of alarm.com cameras. Of course, the 521, 522, and 622 alarm.com cameras being able to stream with audio to the screen. So being able to watch in on your kids if you're making dinner and hit that button and be able to interact with them. And then, of course, there's the video only models as well. This also includes, if you notice the part numbers, not just the original alarm.com outdoor 722 camera, but also a lot of the newer Alarm.com cameras as well, being able to send those to the screen. So also great for business. If the main panel is in an office and you have a remote keypad up at the front and so forth, you would be able to watch in perhaps at your storefront or over the cash and so forth, and be rather than having to purchase a separate quote unquote monitoring station, right? Having a separate screen and sort of interface to be able to view all those, where you can do it straight from the panel, is very convenient. So the install wizard is pretty new. The last update or two. We love this. We find that our dealers and so forth love this as well, and integrators, that you are able to really walk through and have this very simple installation experience, but not only a simple installation experience, but also, in the industry where finding a good technician can be, tough at times, or even being able to get a technician up to speed with training, or even just having to, if you don't have a technician, sending it in a box and giving it to your customer. But as you open up your phone, if you've noticed, for anyone that's bought a phone recently, or any smartphone in the last however many years, but it's going to walk you through how to set up your phone, and that's what we wanted to bring, right, to the security and smart home space, which is a wizard, something that your technicians or your customers, your homeowners, and whoever can simply walk through simple, these easy steps, and be able to program a panel with very, very little or limited knowledge on, well, how does this, I don't know all the settings. I don't know how to go into programming and do all these things, right? But just make it very simple. So we've created this wizard, right, that will help your technicians, if they use it, to stay consistent, of course, that you are getting the same programming done on every single home, that the experience is consistent and, of course, efficient, right? And we'll get into kind of some of the pages and things as we go as well. Panel access point. As I mentioned before, through Qualcomm, we're able to broadcast our own SSID. Now, this is not a full-blown, Nighthawk, whatever thousand it is today, with this many antennas, and it's not a mesh, wireless mesh system like Eero or Orbi or Ubiquiti or whatever you want to call it. This is kind of like a get you out of jail free card, which is, you have a camera, or an indoor or outdoor camera. You have perhaps a secondary IQ remote that works over Wi-Fi, or a doorbell camera, where you're just not getting great range from the customer's network, from their router, because you cannot dictate where that ISP provider piped into the home. It's on the other side of the house, and that's where the router and the thing is. And most homeowners, as you know, think that if they go down to Best Buy and they pick up a really expensive $300 router, that's just going to solve all their problems, right? Which we all know very well that is not the case. To have for a homeowner to have a real, true, robust network is very, very not common, right? It's very uncommon. So in those situations where perhaps, let's say, obviously the Wi-Fi just doesn't happen to be super awesome in that home anyhow, and then to add to that, where you now have a doorbell on the outside of the wall, is now making it that much more difficult. So typically your panel is going to be a bit closer to that doorbell or that outdoor camera than what the homeowner's router would be. So again, if you remember what I said before, this is a get you out of jail free card, right? So this is, if I tried everything else and it's just not working, perhaps I can give the panel access point a try, which is, hey, we're going to broadcast like 20 feet or so, an extra 20, maybe 25 feet. And, of course, your panel needs to be connected to Wi-Fi. You can turn on this feature, turn on panel access point, create your own SSID and password, and then broadcast that. And then, of course, set up your doorbell to then connect to the panel's access point, right? So this is kind of the get you out of a jam. This is not, hey, homeowner, guess what? I'm putting in a new panel, and this is going to be a private network, so you can use this aside for your TVs, all these things. It is not for that. This is not. They are not getting a new private network they get to play with. If anything, that's just going to make your life more of a living hell than what it already had been, trying to mess around with their network, right? We all know that we're not the Comcast or the internet ISP provider, right? Although many people think we are because we do IP cameras, but this is get you out of a jam. Your doorbell's failing. You have an unhappy customer, and so forth. My panel happens to be within 20 feet. Let's kick on the access point. Let's port that doorbell camera through the access point and have a whirl. And hopefully, and you should, therefore get better results. And then if you don't, well, you're going to have that conversation with the customer on you need something better than that Nighthawk router that you paid $300 for, that's stuffed back, in the basement, a floor down on the other side of the home, right? So, and of course, you all know that. But this, as I mentioned, is a help you get out of a jam, right? Panel access point. So, dual path is something we've done from our first generation panel. It, of course, is now a lot more beefed up with IQ Panel 2 and 2 Plus, which is because of our Qualcomm chipset, providing really great performance and intelligent redundancy with 4G LTE and Wi-Fi speaking at the same time. So we're essentially sending everything over both paths, right? Both Wi-Fi and the cellular channel at the same time. So no more having that weird, awkward moment with a customer and the door lock's not, turning over and you're standing right there in front of them and you're trying to tell them how cool it works and it's just not being cool right at that moment. And you're like, this kind of sucks. We don't want you to have that experience. Therefore, providing you with both paths is essentially this race, right, to alarm.com to therefore then get that signal out quicker. It's not a failover. It's not going to wait until the first fails and then it's going to try for the secondary path. None of that nonsense. It is both paths at the same time, all the time. Okay. Built-in language translation, of course, for all of those bilingual or trilingual homes, we got you covered for at least a couple languages. So this is French Canadian, actually. Maybe we should change the little flag here to Canadian symbol. But French Canadian and Espanol, right? So Spanish and English. These are toggles. So it's simple for your customer. It's simple for a technician. You can even do it from alarm.com to therefore, again, afford your customer the flexibility of, and your technician or your sales not having to carry a separate SKU or to have to flash, right, a panel, plug in with some USB or laptop or something and change everything. This is, through, of course, as you can see here, Google Translate, right? So these are the languages we have today. We'll eventually get more down the road. It is actually a little bit of a difficult process. Even though Google flips a word over for us, it's still, we have to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. So we've got to make sure it makes sense, right? So we are very, very conscientious about security, especially with everything that goes on today. Security is just really taking or has taken a turn for what we used to call security and what we now call security. Meaning that, before it was don't steal my TV, I don't want you to break into my home. And it is still a bit today, of course. But more today than it has ever been is the security of whether it be identity or internet, and all of those cloud and so forth, right? A little more of a I just stumbled myself. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but cyber, I guess is what I'm looking for, like more of a cyber security, right? And so we take that very seriously. Not only do we want to, yes, protect your home, but also the integrity of your system and your smart home, right? And your devices and our panel talking to the cloud to get a software update, or talking to alarm.com, or your phone disarming the panel, Bluetooth being encrypted and so forth. We just take that very, very seriously. So with that, comes to these extra features that through software we're able to build into the panel, right? Being a glass break detector. So today you can arm your panel to either stay or away, and you can have this quote unquote free glass break detector. Right now, again, this is limited. This is not. You can see this. The picture is, a few feet away from the glass that's right next to it on the door, not, at the top of the living room wall, protecting all the picture windows in the living room. This is a customer. Your panel's going to go right here, and there happens to be glass around the door. So guess what? We're protecting that for free because I'm going to flip on the panel glass break. It works just like a zone. And we'll get into testing and so forth of those things a little later. But being able to leverage the hardware in the panel and the microphones, right, that are so rarely used now. Being able to leverage that hardware and being able to write some software to it to be able to do these extra things that we can give you essentially at no cost, right? To then be able to set yourself apart and differentiate yourselves from one to another. The other is Bluetooth. Again, with the Qualcomm chipset, we have Bluetooth. What's funny is we actually have Bluetooth in our first panel, and it was kind of this trick question. We always talked about having X amount of radios and one of them being Bluetooth, and we never actually used it. And the reason being was, two things. One, Bluetooth just not being what it was Bluetooth low energy, but not being advanced enough. And what were we going to use it for? Was the other thing, right? There just wasn't really a need, nor was Bluetooth capable more of just streaming audio like to your Jabra headset or something, right? So now with Bluetooth low energy being able to do so much more, we essentially allow you to pair 5 phones. It might be on this next slide here. Yeah, there you go. Pair 5 phones to your panel, therefore giving you this real true sense of convenience, right? So this is, again, as I mentioned, convenience. This is, there will always be a doomsday scenario. What if this? What if that? What if, whatever? There's only so many things you can account for. Same thing with a key fob. It's kind of always my rebuttal. Well, what about? I mean, you lose a key fob. It's the same thing. You lose a key fob, they kind of know more that you have a security system when it has Honeywell written on it, or Qualsys or whatever, than just someone losing their phone. How would someone know that your phone is going to magically disarm your panel, right? They wouldn't. And then to get into your phone to actually use an app or anything, of course they can't, right? Because it's locked. But the other is you also get this sense of security with Bluetooth, with that encryption to the panel, whereas a key fob you would not. And you don't usually forget your phone less than, I don't know, 30 seconds after you left it somewhere. It's not in your pocket or your hand. You're like, where's my phone, right? Now even, you have Apple Watch and so forth that you can ping your phone for you. That's what my wife does. She literally uses the watch for one thing, and she is 100%, hey, this is worth it, just so I can. She doesn't even try to look for her phone. She doesn't even bother trying. She's just walking around the house, and if it is not in her hand, even though it might be right in front of her, she'll go to her watch and ping her phone and make it ding. So it's kind of funny how we've become dependent, unfortunately, on these phones, right? So being able to disarm your panel, really having this true convenience, which we've been pitching for so long in the industry with key fobs and the moms and the groceries and the kids coming in. But really now you do not have to do anything. It stays in your pocket, stays in your purse. You walk up to the door, it disarms your panel. You get within, 40 feet of where your panel is, not your front door, of course. And then you can create all this magical things, right, through alarm.com. So being able to create a rule that says when my panel disarms, uh, follow these rules. Turn on the light on my patio or my porch, unlock the door, change the temperature, and so forth. So the other is, again, leveraging hardware. So we have this panel camera, right, which I'm sure most of you know. We do disarm photos. Not only do we do disarm photos, but we also do alarm photos and alarm video. But now recently we've turned it into this motion, kind of this motion sensor activity monitoring, if you want to call it. And it was quite limited. We started doing more with it. So it's based on pixel change. It's not a true, it's not a PIR. It's not a security device. It's not going to technically work too well at night or when it's dark, of course, because it is based on pixel change, right? So not being able to see pixels at nighttime, we don't have that ability. So it is essentially this group 25, which is always on activity. Motion has nothing to do with your alarm, whether it is on or off, or armed or disarmed. Now, what we do, or what we can do now with the motion, is trigger an event. You can walk in front of it, and it triggers an event, right? Turn the light on, change the temperature. After 4 minutes, it will allow you to then trip it again. And then we started doing things with the Bluetooth and with the remote disarming. So now, again, through 230, right? You're able to. So a lot of the questions that came up was, hey, I love Bluetooth disarming, or I love disarming from my app on my phone, but I don't get, I no longer can receive. It's not able to send me a photo, right? Because I've disarmed it before I ever entered the home. So now I don't have a picture or, of whoever walked in the home. So what we do now is we essentially have this rule. The panel knows how it has been disarmed. So whether you punched in a code or whether you remotely disarmed it. Now, Bluetooth counts as a remote disarm, essentially, right? Because you're not there. So whether it be you've pulled up your app, disarmed from alarm.com, or you simply walked up to your home and it disarmed remotely, the panel then knows that once it received that remote disarmed command, that it will snap a picture based on the next motion event that the camera picks up. Okay, so you've disarmed your panel. Now, whether it's at your front door, cool. It might be around the corner in your garage. You came into the other door, but at some point, someone's going to walk by the panel, or you're going to walk by the panel and see if it actually disarmed, or what the weather's like, or whatever it may be, and it's going to snap that picture for you. So you still get those disarmed photos. It's now just based on motion, and we'll do more with motion. We actually also in 230. Created more software to where now the panel camera and quote unquote motion is a full-blown image sensor. So you can now, through the correct package type with alarm.com, right? You have to have the image sensor package. You can now peek in to the panel camera and request that snapshot and peek in next motion. Now, your motion has to be enabled as that zone, as that group, because your panel has to know when to detect motion. So therefore, on alarm.com, you can peek in next motion, and the next time someone walks in front of it, of course, or detects motion, it will snap that picture for you. So you now have a free image sensor, right? No hardware required. So very, very cool. We mentioned this before, right? Peek in next motion, actually, that's everything I just talked about. So the next couple things I'm not going to spend too much time on, and then we're going to take a quick break here in a minute, but I'll get into it a little more into the technical side. But essentially, building all of these tools, some of the greatest things I think that we have, more so than what it would attract a homeowner, but to a technician. I was and have been a technician for many years, 15 years now. So to be able to have these things an advanced sensor test where we can show you on a graph exactly, what the frequency and the signal strength is compared to, maybe the noise and interference in a home is like, mind-boggling. So this is available, of course, for all legacy radios. PowerG has its own sensor test page, which we'll talk about. And then, of course, all these diagnostics for Z-Wave, right? So being able to, again, visually see the map of a Z-Wave network and understanding Z-Wave, being able to see those things. Again, this is all stuff we're going to get in depth with. So we have a whole giant page, system health, or system tests, as we call it, with checking to make sure your daughter card's working properly, your PowerG and your Z-Wave and so forth. Your sensor test page, glass break test, checking the connection between the panel and the customer's local network. All very useful tools. Now, right before we take a quick break here, as I mentioned, we support a lot of PowerG. This isn't even the whole list. So if you go onto our website, we'll bring it up at the end, dealers.qualsa.com, log in. We curate and keep up to date this kind of this never-ending list of supported devices, because now we support Honeywell DSC and 2GIG and so forth. So and PowerG. So we have this long list of supported and tested devices and what, if any, their limitations are. Okay, so be sure to check that out. You can see on here there are quite a few devices. This is not the entire list, but there are a lot of motion detectors. They have new motion detectors, 360 motion detector you put up on the ceiling now. This glass break detector is actually very, very cool. It's very small, very nice. You can see this outdoor image motion. Here's the indoor one, the image viewer, right? And of course, repeaters and indoor-outdoor sirens, and temperature sensors and flood sensors, and of course all the key fobs, and then excuse me, Z-Wave devices, of course, right? So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then of course there's the S-line devices, Qualsys, right? IQ Remote, which of course is our product. We have a new version. I have a picture of it towards the end. It's way, way, way better. The processing power and everything is insane. This, is no more an off-the-shelf modified tablet. The new remote is 100% our design, so it's actually quite a bit different. Even the touch and feel, I mean, it's heavier. It's built way, way, way better. Remember how I mentioned at the beginning with the capacitive screen and the plastic? Well, if you remember, the IQ remote kind of had this, it was like plastic, but it kind of wasn't. Well, now it is an actual like glass, like real glass capacitive screen, edge to edge, which is really nice. And then, of course, all of our sensor line, right? So translators and medical pendants and motions and so forth. So we're going to, let's see, we're just, yep. So we're going to take a quick 10-minute breather for anyone that needs to hop out and do a restroom break and so forth. And we will continue on here in 10 minutes. That puts us at quarter after. So I'm just going to hang out. I'm going to put everything on mute, and we'll catch you back here in 10 minutes. So don't go anywhere. Well, don't leave, but stay tuned. We'll see you in a minute. Okay, I'm 1 minute early. We're gonna get going. So those up, running around. Let's dive back into it. Um, Thank you again for everyone being on today. For those that may have joined a little late, sure appreciate everyone. And my name is Jeremy from Qualsys. I'm a technical account manager. Um, if you are trying to talk to me and I am not answering, I promise it's not because I dislike you or I'm not listening. It's because I can't listen, actually. And you're all on mute. And so please use the chat down below on your GoToWebinar control panel. And we have Kevin Woodworth and Jason Horton as part of the TAM team answering your questions. So hopefully you're keeping them busy. They said that you've had, well, all of you, I guess, or some of you, or whoever's asking, but there have been a lot of very good questions. So please keep it up. If anything, feel free to reach out. Don't be shy. And yeah, we'll get moving here. So we are a third of the way through, maybe a little more, I guess, depending on how much I want to talk today. Just kidding. So we're going to continue on with a little more getting into hardware. And okay, there you go. As you can see, you've probably looked at this screen. This is just a very cool screen. A lot of little call outs and so forth. I purposely left it on here if you didn't know. Little call outs about, IQ panel and, all these little features and benefits and so forth. And if you noticed, some of the green ones are a little more intriguing or I guess a larger feature, and then of course the bold, and then the less faded words also. So just a very cool screen. If you want anything from this this presentation, feel free to ask. If you want this page, hey, we'll cut it out, we'll send it to you. So not a huge deal. And we very much appreciate it. So thank you for being on and wanting to learn more about Qualsys. And if you already use us, we definitely appreciate your business and support. And for those that don't but are here learning, we're sure are grateful for that as well. So moving on. So a little about hardware. Some of this is pretty basic, right? So this is the panel, of course, which you've seen. We talked about the panel camera in front. This is kind of just calling out, what is what. Our microphones are on the bottom, okay, of the panel. They actually face down. So just be aware that if this ends up on a table, think about and you're enabling panel glass break, or this account has two-way voice and so forth. Your microphones are now facing the tabletop. So just be conscientious of course, always where and how you mount your panel and how it's going to affect certain things, whether it be as we're going to get into the antenna, for example, that hangs out the back, the microphones that face down, and what features, if you're using them, how it will affect that. LED status on the side, right? So this is going to tell you at a glance, even when your panel is off, or essentially the screen is black, what the status of your panel is, right? Green, that it's not armed, ready to arm, and red, that it is armed, and so forth. So the back, the back actually has a little more mythology or thought to it. If you notice, there's a lot of holes back there. So there's a couple of locking screws. Some of you might ask, well, how the heck am I supposed to put those locking screws on if I got it on the back of the wall? Good question. There are three different locking screws. There's one that goes up from the bottom, kind of like a Skybell or an older panel would, right? A little locking screw, which of course you can, for commercial, if you have to, UL and so forth, if you have to lock it down, then of course you can get to that if it's mounted on the wall. The two in the top corners are more for that table top style. That way, if someone happens to trip over cable, maybe the panel falls, everything just isn't, blow open, right? Keeps it nice and closed. So Now, what I wanted to call out was there's six. If you notice, six locations to mount to mount or to send a screw through, right? You can see top and bottom. Now, why six? Now, obviously, there's a bunch that are different shapes and sizes and so forth, and different angles. And this is actually purposeful. And I wanted to call this out because it's actually very cool that we thought of this, which is these are actually all specified or spec'd, as you would say, to fit a gang box. So single, right? I can mount this right over top of a ring, a mud ring, a gang box, whatever it may be, and the screw will send right through these two screws. And then guess what these are for, right? Double, and then triple, right? One, two, three. So it will actually fit right over top of that. So if you've pre-wired and you send this, you mount this right over top of the box. You're just screwing it right into the box, which is very, very convenient for all of those that do those kind of larger, more custom home wiring and so forth, right? So very, very cool. Now, just be mindful, the back plate is plastic, right? So as you all know, if you're fastening down to a stud or something that has a good grab and you're using a drill, um, do not over tighten it, right? You're gonna tweak the plastic, and that's gonna, I've been into a home where it was my panel constantly tampers, and I could push on the screen, and it would tamper every time I pushed on the screen, right? And then of course when I opened it up, I could tell. So essentially, if I can push on the screen, that means the tamper button's not being pressed, right? And so you start diagnosing things. Okay, well, why isn't the tamper button being pressed? Well, it's too far away from the tamper button. Why is it too far away from the tamper button? Well, it's screwed down too tight, and it's over a gang box that really has, good grip, right? You can really tighten it down through a gang box before it will strip the plastic, right? So or even a stud. And so it can, depending on how tight you locked it down and what screw holes you could tweak and warp the plastic a little bit. So you have to back it off a little bit so everything sits nice and close together. You'll see an RF antenna hole. We'll talk about that here coming up. And of course, this perforated breakaway, right? So this is meant for, of course, if you send a screw through here and someone were to pull the panel off the wall, of course, you get all the lovely stuff from alarm.com, which is the smash and crash technology, but also a breakaway, right? Again, to meet UL, a breakaway tamper, right? An actual wall tamper, which is nice. So the inside a little bit, we kind of talked about this already, but this is just a nice little line diagram. You can see all the cards, PowerG card. And this is that antenna that I was talking about. So you see this at the top. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but if you look straight above, you see the battery, and then there's a Siren. And right above the Siren, there's a long little rectangle thing with a little cable line, like a snake S, that clips down on the vertical PowerG and PowerG card, right? This is that antenna I was talking about. So you need to pick and choose. IQ Panel 2 Plus always comes with the PowerG card, so therefore that antenna is being used. If you are not using or will not ever use PowerG in a home, and they are, a customer or yourself adamant that you must use an alarm.com image sensor, well, you can still do so. That's fine. Get the image sensor card, the radio, plug it in, right? Follow the instructions, of course. Plug it in, carefully remove. This is a little connector right here that you'll pull off the card from that antenna, and then you'll snap it down on the PowerG, or sorry, not the PowerG, but the image sensor antenna. Okay. So just a nice, diagram calling out a few things. Panel battery, right? There's a little asterisk. Just make sure if you ever have to replace the battery, always, and just like anything, right? Make sure it's powered down. Take the battery out. It's very simple. There's actually a blue tab. It's like a glorified command strip. You just tug on it and it pulls away, and now your battery just comes loose, and you unplug it and stick the new one in. So it's very, very simple. And then, of course, powering it down. Again, is very not only easy for you, but it's so much easier for a customer. If you have to tell it, Rule 101, right? Tech 101 is, I have a problem. What's going on? I don't know. Reboot your panel, right? So that's always been Rule 101 with anything, reboot or power cycle, right? So if you have to do this, you're telling a customer over the phone. I know every single one of you on here have done this before, which is Do you even remember where the power supply is? Because guess what? The customer probably doesn't have a little screwdriver floating around to get into the back of the panel, right? To undo the connection. And did you even put it there? Maybe it was a takeover, and who knows where the power supply is. So it's much easier. We've created this, software feature to actually be able to power down or reboot the panel simply from the software, and the customer has access to that, right? So through their code, 1234, their master code, they'll have two icons through their settings. They'll have a reboot and they'll have a power down, which is very, very convenient. Much more simple than having to go through all that other rigmarole, right? The other thing is doing a hard reboot. If for whatever reason your panel is, I personally have yet to see this on IQ Panel 2 and 2 Plus, but if your panel's locked up or it's frozen, and just it is not working the way that it should be working, and it's not powering down or it's not rebooting, before you start pulling things out of the wall, you can, like your laptop, right, force it to shut down. So you can hold the power button. So on the side of the panel, there's a button, and it looks just like this. It looks just like that button that the hand's pointing to. That's how you turn it on. You press and hold it for 3 seconds. The light will start blinking. It'll power on, just like a tablet. To power it off, or to put it to sleep, you would actually just click it one time, like, again, like your phone, and it puts the panel to sleep, right? It turns the screen off. Press it again, it wakes it back up. If you press and hold it for 30 seconds, it will force the panel to shut down, just like your laptop. You're essentially crashing it, right? You're forcing it to crash. So just be aware of that. But there is a way to not have to, again, unplug everything, right? So the other thing is, this is, this is common for us, and this is probably something that you've heard throughout the grapevine of Qualsys, which is, what the heck is going on with the power supply? Nothing actually is going on with the power supply. When you think about, or that Qualsys has an issue with power supply and they don't work, or et cetera, et cetera. When you think about a tablet, okay, I'm going to explain where this comes from and why it is, essentially, and what we've done to help you all. So when you think about a tablet, right, or a phone, here's another side thought. Has anyone ever seen seen or purchased a phone cord, right? So whether it's USB-C or Lightning or whatever, or micro USB, longer than 3 meters or 10 feet? I urge you to try and find one, because I don't think they exist. There are certainly long ones out there, and they seem super long, but I bet you they're only 10 feet. And I'm pretty confident. And this is because of voltage drop, right? So when you think about a tablet, so our panel, again, right, it is very tablet. So therefore, power is different than your traditional old school, alarm system, right? So in the box previously, again, and I'm going to explain something as well. Our panel operates, minimum 4.5 volts. Okay, so it needs at least 4.5 volts to power on, to charge the battery, and to actually work. Now, what people have been finding, of course, are the times that you do not have a say. You have no say on where the power is run when you walk into a home and it's a hardwired takeover system, for example, right? Of course, you're replacing the keypad from where the old keypad was, because that's what you do. And then, of course, they've used 22.4, which, of course, standard, right? And that goes to the CAN somewhere, and who knows how far away that is. And then, of course, there's another wire that you're going to have to jump onto to get to power. With our panel, originally we supplied a 5.5 volt power supply, and so this was making it more difficult for those type of scenarios, right? So voltage drop, 5.5 volts means over 22 gauge wire. There's a really great site you can reference as well. You should use it. Voltage drop calculator, Google it. It's on calculator.net. But if you understand, electricity and so forth, but the thinner the gauge of your wire, the more voltage drop, right? the less, so if I start at 5.5 and I've got 40 feet of cable, 22 gauge cable, because that's, you know, that's very thin, I'm going to have a much greater, or sorry, I'm going to have a greater voltage drop, but I'm going to have fewer volts on the other end when my panel is actually attached to it and drawing current and so forth, than if I were to use a thicker gauge wire like 18 gauge. Okay, so this is what you may have been seeing in those situations, right? So, you know, the panel comes with its own standard, you know, little cable we put in the box, like 5 or 6 feet. But be very mindful if you have a box that is a 5.5 volt power supply. Make sure you understand and you think and you map out in your head before you ever mount something to the wall, right? Where's your wire going? Oh, that's, you know, probably cutting it close. So just be aware of that, right? So 5.5 volts. Now, something also, so what we have done, so that's you know, our panel that works and needs 4.5 volts. We've always shipped with a 5.5 volt power supply. This is, you know, kind of the, you know, the quote unquote headache that it has caused, I guess, because traditionally, you know, it's not something we're used to. It's different. What we have done, and you need to watch for this because it may not be all through distribution yet. So if you have something to write down, notepad or paper or whatever it may be, or you're going to chat it in and ask, and you can copy and paste it, feel free. But we now ship through a different panel revision. Okay, so every time we change something, if we're even changing the back plate of the panel, or we're changing this little diode or resistor in the panel, et cetera, so we can keep track of things, it is essentially a different hardware revision, right? And that's not really known, you know. We just obviously we continue to improve and tweak things. So therefore, for tracking and so forth, we know the hardware revision. Now, what you need to know is that at a revision G, some of revision G and all of revision H, and I'll tell you how to find this, we supply a 7 volt power supply. So through working and so forth, we've made it some changes in the panel to where you can use a different power supply. And again, we support and supply a 7 volt power supply, therefore giving you more, right? So no longer 22 gauge wire at 40 feet, it's now closer to 22 gauge wire close to 100 feet. Okay, and then of course, if you're using 18 gauge wire, it is that much more, as you can see on my on my screen here. So we always, you know, as a manufacturer, we want to under promise, over deliver, right? So be mindful again of the gauge of the wire. 18 gauge being a thicker strand, you'll get more, right? Your voltage will travel more. So to find the revision number, if you look at the panel serial number, okay, not the IMEI, but the actual SN, the actual serial number, it's on every box. It's also in the About section in the panel software. You'll see the 5th digit. The 5th digit of the panel is a letter, and you will see letter, you'll most likely see a G today. If you have something that you know, has been sitting in a room for quite a while, you may see something less. Now, most of G and all of H come with a 7 volt power supply. Okay, at E, okay, I'm giving some insider's knowledge here. At revision E and above, we did not, at E and F, we did not include, as I mentioned, the 7 volt power supply. However, the hardware change was implemented. So if you were to find or to use a different power supply, okay, and you still kept it within range, you would be able to use that would be supported if you have revision E or more. So if you see on my screen, right, a 7 volt power supply is only supported on panels with hardware revision E or newer. And most of G and all of H come with that 7 volt power supply in the box. So I should have just let you read the thing on the side instead of ranting here for 10 minutes. So as you see on the page, sorry for the giant long spiel. You know, Power supply, has a barrel jack, of course a terminal board. It's screwless. You can easily slip in a wire very simply. The other thing to note is because it is a lower voltage, there just simply is not enough extra. There's not enough power to therefore then, after doing everything and making the panel work, to have leftover and to be able to actually sound or push voltage to a Siren. So you must use a 12-volt DC power supply in series, right? So essentially this exterior Siren output and ground is somewhat like an open collector, pulls voltage to ground. Okay, so it's you're opening and closing a loop essentially. So when you have a power supply hooked up to a Siren, 300 milliamps max, okay, current. When of course your alarm goes off, that loop closes, and now it's completing the circuit, allowing the Siren to be charged and to sound. Right when you disarm the panel, it opens the loop, and of course that therefore no longer travels through. Okay, software. So we're going to talk. We're going to start getting into some programming stuff here, and we have about an hour and a half. So from the main screen, you can see we kind of section things. You see header, settings tray, user interface, page indicator, and so forth. So at the top, of course, weather. If your weather doesn't show up, okay, make sure you have weather enabled on the package. It doesn't auto select. Even if you have interactive gold, you got to go down and select it, and it's $0. Okay. If you're interactive gold. And then you're at the end of your install and it still isn't showing up. If you have access to mobile tech, or you can make a phone call to someone who does for that account, there is an option through AirFX to select send weather to panel, and that will show up in extremely fast. So get that weather to your customer, right, to the panel. So excuse me. Then, of course, you have the time at the top and the date. On the right-hand side, see a little 8 bubble on this envelope. That can be your logo. That can get pushed from alarm.com, or you can do that yourself through an SD card and put your logo there. And that's where you will find a contact us, your information, video tutorials, of course. And we now have French video tutorials. If you need those, please ask. Marketing at qualsys.com. We can help you out. Get some French video tutorials on your panel. And then, of course, the other is this is where you find all your messages, alerts, and alarms. Low battery, had a loss of supervision. The panel went into alarm. There's an invalid disarm, and so forth. So just a nice little bucket. Now, pulling down the settings tray gives you a few more features. It's very simple. We made it this way to expose sound and brightness and so forth to a customer as well. Of course, there are things we deem customer okay to play with, and things that we would of course hide behind an installer or a dealer code, right? So you can see at a glance, right, my panel is disarmed. If you're actually on any other page on the panel and you happen to swipe this down and hit that little green locked icon, it's actually going to send you right back. It's kind of like a go home button. That's going to send you right to this arming screen, your security screen. Then of course you have your statuses, battery, it's charging, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular. If you touch each one of those, it'll give you a nice little readout here of what's happening. Of course, volume. This is not like in everything the entire panel volume. This is simply voices for the most part. So beware, hey, I turned down the volume and it's still beeping or whatever, right? It's still making a chime. That is different. This is essentially this master voice volume. So brightness. And of course you have settings, another shortcut to messages, photo frame, we'll get into. You're able to make your screen turn off at a certain time at night. So it actually goes black, like a real black, not like a TV, it's black, but it's actually still glowing, right? Because that's kind of annoying. But just like a reel, it's actually off, right? So changing pictures, adding advertisements, some dealer branding and so forth to the screen as well. Clean screen, self-explanatory, right? Kind of locks you out. You can clean it, and then of course your language toggle. So we're gonna get into the programming side. We're gonna basically hit settings and show you a few things. This is what your homeowners would see, and I'm not going to go through every single one of these. but they have access to display and brightness. They can mount an SD card so they can load photos of their family and stuff on the, on the photo frame, change the weather temperature. There is a more in-depth, rather than the messages, alerts, and alerts and alarms icon. There is a status icon that gives you a lot better information, and you can filter through zone type, Z-Wave, statuses, and so forth, and then some other, EULA, license agreement, activity monitoring. But we're not going to get all crazy into that stuff. But what we're going to get into and get all crazy in is advanced settings. And now all the technicians can wake up again, because now it's fun, right? So we're going to talk about settings. We get into some nitty gritties with programming, and talk about the wizard and just how simple it is to program and navigate around IQ Panel 2 Plus, right? So there are two different codes, 1111, 2222. One, of course, is hierarchy over the other. If you're entering with the dealer menu, of course, you have everything that the installer has. Now, there really isn't that much difference between, one and the other. The dealer does have a bit more access for things like master reset. That's probably the main thing, the main differentiator that you would use, which is being able to default your panel, right? Wipe it back to zero, especially after a training session. You have people in, they're dawdling around, and of course they made some, zone, say an obscene comment, and that's the last thing you want to have when your boss opens the door to his office, right? Is the panel to swear at him or something. So gotta master reset that. 2222 dealer menu is the way to get to the master reset. There's a few other things, being able to manually enter dealer contact info, some of the dealer branding, being able to load some of your marketing images on the screensaver and actually lock them so they can't be erased. For example, if you're using in a show home or something, right, model home. Being able to upload your logo, those sorts of things. So, so all of our training and our material, actually, our install manual is actually all based on the dealer menu, with a few little call outs. So anything that you see from us, we're pretty much always talk and show you dealer menu, because that, it's easier to show everything and then take some stuff away and say, oh yeah, hey, by the way, this isn't available for installer, rather than the other way around. So be mindful of that, little asterisks and so forth. So hands-on lab. So let's everyone get out of panel and let's all play together. But in the box of every panel, there's this quick guide. There comes, of course, a bracket, and there's actually a table stand also. So we ship that for you in the box. It is free. It isn't a separate SKU. Well, free, it's included in the price, of course, but it is not a separate SKU. You don't have to worry about it, right? The barrel jack is there. It's not a separate SKU. So no separate ordering. We're going to follow this a couple things, and then we're going to hop around a little bit. But one thing I wanted to mention is actually opening and closing the panel. It is tricky. It's a really tight fit. We're very open. If you ask anyone from Qualcomm, yep, it's difficult to open and close. Now, the first couple times, yep. Once you get the hang of it, you've done a handful of installs. It is simple. You have your aha moment. It'll snap together. It is more like a tablet snapping closed and staying closed than it is something that you're going to open and close and hinge 100 times. It's just, that's not what it's for. So so think of it like that. So I wanted to call out two things. One, of course, the antenna, and the other actually closing it, right? So you can see on step 2 here, basically, or there's a big one, but the second image, there's this hole right in the back of the panel, which I called out before. There is a white, when you pull our panel out of the box, there is a white antenna hanging out the back. This is not a cellular antenna, okay? This does not have anything to do with communication. This has to do with, well, communication to your sensors. We have very cool tools, and I'll show you can do it yourself, and I would show you in person. But you can go to a sensor test page, a real-time noise floor, visual graph of our panel. measuring and showing you basically the signal strength or noise floor in a room or in that environment. And you can hold on to that antenna and crinkle it up in your hand, and you're gonna watch that thing drop like a rock, like no signal, right? So it's very important to understand with any panel, really, and more so ours, of course, because you have the ability to reorient the antenna in kind of any way, shape, or form that you want, as long as you are getting the best result possible, which for us, we find and we urge and suggest that the antenna be hanging down vertically. So whether it is sitting on top of a table and your power and your antenna is hanging down back off the back of the table, or it's on a wall and it's hanging down inside the wall, that what we have found is the best orientation. Now, if you in a home, it happens to be something different, you've wrapped it up, around the side and taped it down, that's your thing. But just be very mindful and use the test, which will show you to understand and to know, the relevant frequency and noise floor level in that home, and what changing the orientation of your antenna is going to do, and if it will, and how it will affect the sensors in your home, right? So make sure that's sending out through it has its own dedicated hole. Punch a hole in the wall, 3/8 or screwdriver, send it down inside. The other is closing the panel. Closing the panel can be tricky. We suggest, as you can see here, I'm a sandwich guy. I just kind of place them together. The front flat up against the back that's on the wall, and you'll see you kind of wiggle it around. You'll see that it actually has this spot without even it actually clicking into place. It like sits there nicely. As click the bottom in. The bottom actually has spring-loaded tabs, so that will clip in really, really simple. And you notice you'll still have a bit of a gap on the top. So you want to run, as you can see in the diagram, your thumb and 2 fingers, maybe 2 hands, and go from one side to the other, and look down on the top, and you'll see these little tabs. You can kind of see it. Well, there's little arrows on our back plate as well. There's actually a groove and indication to where these tabs are, but those essentially snap together. So if you squeeze and kind of roll the back towards the front and you go from one side to the other, you should get 4 pops, right? 4 pops being 4 good pops, not 4 bad pops, but 4 pops being closed, 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 right? I snapped it and assembled it, and it is now together. And you will visually see a difference between it kind of being almost closed and okay, yeah, it's actually closed. And of course you want to make sure, right? Because you don't want to have, as I mentioned before, my homeowner touched the screen and it says tamper when they touch the screen, because it's not completely closed, so the tamper switch is not actually touching that standoff in the back to actually keep it closed. So this is of course table style. The little back plate, you can open it up with your thumb and your finger, pull it back. If it's on a wall, you can toss it. If it is with the table stand, keep it, because it hides everything, right? It hides all the insides, and you just see the cable coming out the back. And then same thing with the table stand. You might think it's all the way in, but give it a good little push up into the keyholes, and you'll hear it go snap, snap. Okay, so that way someone doesn't pick it up and just the table stand happens to fall off. So connect to power, right? Use a 5.5 or 7-volt power supply, as we mentioned. It does matter. It is polarity sensitive. It is DC power, so positive and negative. Hold the side button, 3 seconds, it'll come back up. Of course, you want to make sure you have an account created through alarm.com, because then firing it up and booting up the panel, it'll start looking for towers. Hopefully grab one, and then you'll want to run through your cell test and so forth, right? So moving through to the wizard, this is where everything just makes your life so much more simple. And I just noticed there's kind of our little indicator bar is a nice, interesting color green. I need to change that. Anyway, so we have start. So you're going to go ahead, click the button. We're going to start, rock and roll. And we're going to walk you through the wizard. So this is just how simple it is. Connect to Wi-Fi, of course, very first thing, right? We want to connect to Wi-Fi because we want dual path. And of course, we want software updates for the future, right? So you want to keep your customers engaged and happy, and that the guy that knocks on the door next year isn't throwing something in their face saying, I have something that you don't have. and your customer's like, actually, I have something you don't have, right? And because their panel is continuously downloading new features and all this new cool stuff, right? So connect to Wi-Fi 2.4 or 4 or 5 gigahertz. Then it's going to go through the system check. Okay, so we will do it for you. We're going to make sure your battery's connected, that it is charging. So therefore, we're checking to make sure you have proper voltage, right? Which is very cool. Then we start checking the cards, right? We make sure that they were assembled properly and they are seated properly and have a good connection, and they're able to communicate with the main board of the panel, right? So then we go through all the cards. So we'll check PowerG, it will check Z-Wave, it'll check your S-Line or 345 or 433 card, your sensors, your radio security sensors. And then, of course, we're going to start doing a cell test. So once you hit next ones, it actually kind of just, excuse me, it runs all through this kind of on its own automatically, which is nice. So if you're ever stumbled, as in like, oh, what the heck is this? I don't know where I'm supposed to go. There's a nice little question mark in the top left corner, and that will open up and bring you to some help. If you don't care about the wizard and you don't want to use it, or you've used it, you've gone through, and you want to hop around to another part in the wizard and go back to something, you can use a little menu hamburger on the right side and it will open up a pane. You can exit and then hop to a different page if you'd already been there. So activating the radio, right, making sure that it is connected, it's grabbed a tower, it will then go through its thing and essentially do a comm test, right? It'll do a radio test for you, spitting back oh, see, hey, look at this one, timed out. That's not good, right? Please try again later. Okay, cool. Well, sometimes it takes a few minutes, of course, for alarm.com and everything to get registered and to actually create an account. Not only that, just because you create it with alarm.com doesn't mean that, oh, everything is happy and it's just going to work. Alarm.com in the background is still sending all that information to the carrier, right? So they have to activate and create this account on the carrier's network. So there is a little still processing to do. Sometimes just quicker than others. If you've noticed, sometimes during the day, right, more activations. So retry, right, or go back. Make sure your cell test goes through. And then, of course, there you go. Went through, successful. It's activated, connected to Verizon, LTE, and 3 out of 5 bars. And now my system check is complete. Perfect. So that means it is talking to alarm.com, and the rest is just a gravy train. Do I want to check for updates? Of course I do, because of course today we have 2.3.1, which I mentioned you can use. Just to hit on that real fast, today, for those that do not know, if you did not get an email, there wasn't anything marketing related sent out. It is more of an improvements build, nothing crazy features and so forth. More / better support, some tweaks, some fixes, some alarm.com fixes and help. So to get this build, you can manually type in a patch tag, or you can later today, it should be posted to alarm.com, so you can therefore push it to a panel that might need it one at a time. And of course, manage these things, right? So we manage them to an extent for you, in the fact that when we release a software update, we help you manage the update on your own, being at your pace, right? So we just want to make sure that when we send a software update, that it's not being blasted to an insane amount of people and without your permission, because that is not what we do. So you have all the control. We help you kind of manage the process, and therefore we won't just blast it out to everyone on your behalf. So make sure you're on a mailing list. If you've ever logged into our website, you should be on the list. If you're not, please get on it. And you can check as soon as you log into dealers.qualsys.com. There will be a TSB posted either today or very, very shortly about what is included in this 2.3.1. Okay, so so just be mindful of that. So back to this, check for updates. Of course, I want the latest update. The latest update for the Wizard is 2.3.0 until we release 2.3.1 for the Wizard update, right? Again, slow rolling, managed, controlled. Hit start, it's going to check, it's going to go through, hey, look, your software is up to date. You have the most current software version. Well, guess what? This is obviously an old screenshot. Version 2.2.0. Well, congratulations, you're up to date. Or it would download and then it would reboot again, right? Just like a traditional download would. So now, are you ready to add sensors? Well, yes, I am. Thank you. I may have PowerG sensors. I may have 345 sensors, you know, all these things. So we're going to hit start. Your panel essentially goes into, this is the exact same thing as if you were using the auto learn feature on the panel. If you were to manually go into the settings and you hit auto learn and your panel starts listening, right? This is the exact same thing. So we are essentially in auto learn mode, and I am waiting for a sensor to say, hey, here, learn me in, right? So that either that's, I'm tripping something, I'm pulling battery tabs. PowerG sensors, for those that do not use or have used PowerG in the past, for those that use PowerG on Neo or another platform, this is pretty familiar. But you cannot today, and this is, there's actually some new sensors coming later with pull tabs and so forth. But today, a PowerG sensor, you cannot open and close it to pair to a panel. There is a very specific learn button in a PowerG sensor, and every PowerG sensor, that little button is in a different place because it's a different sensor. So make sure you open or follow the instructions. If you've never used that device before, make sure your panel's in auto learn. Okay, of course, put in the battery, all that stuff. This learn button is different than the tamper button on a PowerG device. Okay, so you cannot just tamper it either. So make sure it is the proper button, which is the learn button. The other thing is you must hold this button. And it's not like you're going to hold it until the panel pings up. You're actually going to hold it, and every PowerG device has an LED on it. So you'll see this LED light up. You want to make sure that you're holding that button, and as soon as, or as quick as you notice that LED turned yellow, you're going to let go, and then you'll see it populate and pop up on the panel. Okay, so right now I'm not showing a PowerG device because it would be a different type of sensor ID. There's a prefix, 3 digits, hyphen, and whatever. But so that's PowerG. There's a learn button. Now for other devices, 345, legacy, 319, Qualcomm S-line sensors, you can pull a battery tab if the sensor was created that way, tamper, or of course trip, open and close. And once you've done that, it brings you to this next page, right? And you verify that, oh, yep, that's the same sensor I'm working on, same ID. Okay, good, cool. Now, this section right here, it says partition, okay, FYI. This only shows up if you have partitions enabled on the panel. Okay, so out of the box, just because it's on the latest software does not mean that just partitions are always enabled. Okay, so there is a setting, you must enable partitions. We'll talk about that. It's under the dealer settings or installer settings, either or. Enable partitions. Once you have enabled partitions, again, it doesn't mean that, oh, now I just have 4 partitions all of a sudden. You have to pair or assign a sensor or a device to a specific partition for that partition to even exist, right? If that makes sense. So that's what this little partition field is for. So once you have partitions enabled, you will then see bring this magic partition field to appear, and I can now select, before I save my sensor, right, or completely configure it, I will tell it to be a part of partition either 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, and therefore I can assign devices to those partitions and then move them around if I need to. Of course, sensor type, we populate the sensor type based on the device type, so we know if it is a door or window for you, so that's super nice. and then we're just going to generate the most commonly used sensor groups and names and so forth for the rest of the programming. So sensor group, of course, you have 10. Now, just so you know, when you are using, whether it's PowerG or you're using 345, Honeywell DSC and 2 gig sensors, we are not, other than a loop, right, for Honeywell, because Honeywell does loops or 2 gig does loops, okay? We do not follow, and we are not using their specific groups. So Honeywell DSC, or sorry, I don't know why I keep saying Honeywell DSC, Honeywell 2 gig, 345. For, as you can see here, for traditional Siren or 319 protocol panel, I guess if you want to call it. Group 10 is entry exit normal delay, right? Which means just following the normal delay that the panel has set standard, which is 30 entry, 60 exit, right? Normal delay. We do not change this. If it's a 345 sensor, it's not going to be a 01. We don't change it. 01 is for Honeywell, and 03 is the perimeter, and et cetera, okay? The reason being is we already write it out dummy proof, right? So as you can see, we're not just forcing you to know the groups and know what they mean, but we are writing it out. The group is just a bonus, okay? That number is just a bonus, but we're physically writing it out. Entry, exit, normal, delay. So if I want my 2 gig or Honeywell contact or my DSC contact on the front door to be a normal entry delay, exit delay or whatever, then I'm going to choose entry, exit, normal delay, right? Group 10. So, so don't think about all that other group types and so forth, and do you follow those? Just think of the behavior. I want this to have a delay. Okay, Qual says what's okay, cool, there it is, delay, done. I don't want it to have a delay. Open up the sensor group. You can hit this little down icon. And it will show you the groups, and every other group is the same way. So guess what? 13 hyphen perimeter instant. That's what I want. Okay, so it doesn't matter. So just know that. Other than we'll create another drop down if it's 345 for the loops, and again, be mindful that loops obviously do matter, right? And we currently default a door window contact on a Honeywell or 2 gig device to a loop 1. So make sure you change that, and it is programmed accordingly, right? Loop 1 means I have a contact and there's a wired switch. If it's not a contact and a wired switch, and I'm just using the contact and a standalone magnet, and it's the reed switch I'm using, then it is a loop 2. So make sure you're changing the loop number accordingly, so you're not throwing your head against the wall trying to figure out why it only chimes once and then it doesn't chime anymore, right? So keep in mind. And then, of course, sensor name. Oops, I'll go back here. Whoops, so that didn't work. Yes, back and back. Oh, man, now I'm all over the place. Hold on here. Oh, I'm clicking the thing with my mouse thinking that I'm actually selecting the screen, like the back button. But of course, I'm just advancing the PowerPoint, so that's why I just went ahead. But so of course, sensor name, right, will auto-populate the sensor name to the most common. And then there's custom. You get a full-on keyboard, right? So you can name it essentially whatever you want. Chime type, voice prompts. The source, this is of course contingent on what sensor source. Now the panel can auto-detect if it is an S-line device or a 345 device or a PowerG device. It will select that for you. So just be aware of that. Okay, so now we've created a sensor, we hit save, and then what would happen essentially, so in the real case scenario, it would actually bring you right back to sensor, ready to add sensor, so you can add another sensor or view the list, and add another sensor and view the list. Okay, so rather than hopping. And then when you're done, you can then continue and move on to panel glass break. Do I want to enable panel glass break? Yes or no. When I enable panel glass break, it of course adds to the next zone in the list. Okay, so just be mindful of that. Whenever you add panel glass break, it is that next sequential number, right? If I stopped on 10, panel glass break is 11. Okay, and then of course I can skip anything if I need to skip anything on the wizard. Let's install Z-Wave devices. So smart home lifestyle, right? Let's start. We give you the option right here in the wizard also. Always clear first, right? Always clear first, and then add. Clearing is just going to relieve a lot of stress because I can't say for the people in a factory that don't clear devices from the network they were testing on, but it happens, as you know, it happens. So always clear, and then you can add, right? So we're showing you here, I hit the clear button. It wants me to then press the button on my device. Device has been cleared from the network successfully. Cool, device cleared. See, add device. Next, it is for any of those who've used this panel, it is so easy and so quick to add and remove devices. I'm talking like I can clear and add a device, and I kid you not, probably 15, maybe 20 seconds. If that even. So it is very fast. Z-Wave Plus is awesome improvement from traditional Z-Wave 300. So add device, hit the button on your device, and then of course through Z-Wave and the command class and protocols, it knows the type. You cannot change or tell a light to be a lock. Of course, you can change the name, and you also have the custom name that you can use as well. So that's very convenient. Next is optimized network. We are going to force you because we want to, and because we want you to use the rediscover, right? The Z-Wave network isn't just going to magically map itself because I added a device. Oh, now it's okay. I added another device, and now my network's just magically better. And I added another device, and now my network's magically better. No. When you're adding a device, it's hopping back to the panel, it's hopping out of the panel to add the device. It is now up to you to then rediscover the network because you're rediscovering the network, right? You want to optimize and actually tell all of these devices, hey, there's 15 devices on the network. Go out and kind of create your what we call a neighbors list and know where each device is, and therefore get a grasp on routing, right? On how you're going to send your command back to the panel if you're going to use this device and that device to repeat through and so forth. So you need to optimize or rediscover network always. If you're adding, clearing, unplugging and moving it to the other side of the hall or down the hall or in the other room, you must. That's if you don't want to go back, right? If you want to go back because you love this customer so much, then by all means, never rediscover the network. If that's not your jam, then make sure you rediscover the network before you leave, or you do it remotely from alarm.com. You do not want to go back because if you don't have to, right? No one likes going back for service because you have an unhappy customer because something isn't working right. So and we'll get into Z-Wave a ton here in a little bit as well, but just we put that in there. We want you to rediscover network. You can see your devices list, hit the start button, network optimized, awesome. Pair a Bluetooth device. Remember, we can pair 5 devices. It's going to search just like a Bluetooth headset would. You pop open your phone, and then of course, you search for the device on your phone, and it will pop up with the code. Choose my device on the panel. Sorry, then it pops up with the code. Do I want to connect to Kevin Woodworth? Not really. Kevin's taking your questions, by the way, so you can poke at him. Do I want to connect to Kevin Woodworth's phone or whoever's phone? Yes. I will then hit pair on the panel, and I will hit pair on my phone because the same code is going to pop up. Now, on your phone, just so you know, and so you can let your customer know when they look under the Bluetooth device list, it will say that the IQ panel is there. It'll be on your device list, but it will show not connected, and it will always show not connected because we don't actually stay connected, and we don't need to. We're not streaming anything to the panel. It is simply, a very quick handshake. Is this device in range? Oh, wait, I can see it. Yep, disarm. So therefore it disconnects. That's all it needs it for. Very, very simple. Add users, add users from the wizard. The technician can do this. The customer can go through this also. User's been added. Contact info. If this hadn't been pushed from alarm.com already, you can edit and add this dealer contact info also. And congratulations, you've now passed the wizard. So exit. We are, just do a quick time check here. It is 10 after the hour, and I apologize, but we're going to keep moving. And you're probably taking breaks without me knowing anyway, so that's obviously up to you, and it doesn't matter, and I would never know. So I'm not going to take a break, so you shouldn't take a break, and we're going to learn some cool stuff. So advanced or additional device programming. There are some things I want to call out. There are some tests and some troubleshooting, the Bluetooth, the glass break stuff, a little more. Some we might skip over a little bit. But we'll finish up here probably, hopefully right on time. So we have 50 more minutes, or maybe a little less. And again, thank you. Thanks for being on. We really appreciate you all today. And there are quite a few of you, so that speaks volume. So just talking about Bluetooth, I did just mention this, but I just wanted to show you real fast. When you go into, you can see on all of our manuals and so forth, we have this nice find it on the side. This is actually a screenshot taken from our manual. If you see down the right side, it says find it, settings, and it's this nice tree, right? So you can see this whole pathway to where we're talking about, to where that page can be found. So installation, devices, Bluetooth devices. And then of course it gives me all these options, right? Settings, add, edit, delete, and so forth. So one thing I wanted to call out about Bluetooth, we won't talk about pairing again because we just did that. It's the exact same thing. Except we're not using the wizard, but is the settings for Bluetooth. So I know, I've had this before as well, but for just to put in perspective, those customers, when you leave their home, and of course they have a motion detector, they call you, I know, a day later, 2 hours later, 10 minutes later, saying my motion detector doesn't work, and you ask why. Well, I arm my panel and I'm dancing in front of it, and I walk back and forth 5 times. It's not doing anything, and I don't see the light, right? Excuse me. It is customer education. You need to tell the customer, hey, guess what? It goes to sleep, and you have to talk to them about how it arms with the way, and you need to leave the room, and all those sorts of things. Be sure that if you're adding a Bluetooth to a customer, that you educate them on this, what is called Bluetooth disarm timeout, meaning that I don't want you to have phone calls 10 minutes after you leave that someone armed their panel to a way and they're standing in front of it, because this happens. They're standing in front of it with their phone, and they armed it to a way, and they're like, my panel didn't disarm. I'm standing right here with my phone and it's not disarming, right? This is because of a Bluetooth disarm timeout. So by default, it is set to 10 minutes. That means internally there is a clock on the panel. Once you arm your panel to away, now, Bluetooth will not arm your panel in any way, shape, or form. Will not arm to stay, will not arm to away. It also will not disarm your panel from stay mode, because of course, technically you're staying, right? So it only disarms from away. So you've armed your panel to away, you've waited the 60 seconds, you've left, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There is an additional timer. And this is to protect the homeowner. This is to protect them from, I spent, I've got a garage project going on for quite some time that actually kind of just started. It's been sitting in my garage forever. It's an old vehicle that I've been working on, but just started. So, I'll go out to the garage sometimes and so forth, or maybe just to get car seats out of my vehicle. But if or when I arm the panel behind me, I don't want to disarm it before I ever actually leave that distance of the panel, right? So we're giving you time. So default is 10 minutes. So the customer needs to wait. And when you're showing the customer, because of course they're going to want to see that it works, right? Because they always will. You can manipulate this time. It can go from 1, 5, 10, 20, or 30-minute disarm timeout. So while you're there, you don't even have to leave the home. Technically, you can just toggle off Bluetooth on the phone, because it's as if it's out of range, right? And then flip it back on again. But let the customer know, right? Don't just say, hey, it works, and it's on
it works when you arm your panel and you come home, and it's just going to be great. Because they're not going to get it. Just make sure they know there is an extended period of wait time, right? For whatever you set. Default is 10 minutes. So we talked about this pairing. I could pair with Pedro or the Qualcomm lobby or Kevin Woolworth. We chose Kevin Woolworth again for whatever reason. He must be some cool guy or something to always choose his name on this list. Interesting how that works. And we'll go through this because we just talked about that. Next one is panel glass break. We enabled this in the wizard. We didn't show you the next page, but if you were to go into, again, find it on the left side, installation, installer or dealer settings, I can then enable my panel glass break detector. You can see below it also panel motion. We'll talk about that as well. Once I've enabled this, I then have this zone page, right? So I can then configure the sensitivity level, and I can also choose the sensor group or rename it. I cannot change the sensor type. Panel glass break is panel glass break. Now, this is a reporting device. This is a full-on, it's sending an event, to the central station. So you want to make sure that you're aware, the customer's aware, it works right, that it's near the glass that it should be protecting and no more than 20 feet away, and preferably line of sight, of course. But also this can be armed or used or enabled, activated in either away or stay arming mode. Okay, so and then we'll get into some testing here in a little bit as well. Here's just a quick diagram, right? Preferably line of sight. You can find this in our manual. I'm not going to go through this, everything, right? But close within, 15 feet max, so 15, 20 feet from the panel. Line of sight, 90-degree line of sight. And then there are different glass requirements, right? We just did an insane amount of testing to be able to make this work as close to a traditional glass break detector as we could, right? But there, of course, are variables. Is it sitting on a table or is it on the wall? So just make sure you're conscientious of that. To test the panel glass break, we have on our website, again, another good reason to register or go to dealers.qualsys.com, but under the downloads, you can use a sound file that we have. So you can download this on your phone or device, and then hit the button, it will play it, turn up your speakers, and it will trip the glass break. There's also, if you refer to the quick guide in the manual, a suggested tester, glass break tester. If you want to source one of those, that we found to work best with our panel as well. We don't specifically make one. This is our glass break tester, which is the software file. So just be aware of that, right? And then to actually get into and do some of the testing, we just want to know kind of how the glass break works, and well, if it is working, essentially, right? You may try, it's not tripping, it's being a super pain in the bum. Go into the glass break test. It's under system tests. Again, find it, right? You can then cycle through a clap test, which if you clap, your microphones should be on, and you should get this circle on the right-hand side to show up yellow, meaning that, hey, I can hear sound, right? And then if you were to use your file, your sound, or your tester, the circle should then go green. Basically telling you the difference between, hey, I can hear sound, or I can tell the difference between sound and glass breaking. Okay, and then of course there is a start button at the end, which is essentially makes the microphones. The next time you arm the panel right afterwards for 15 minutes, makes the microphones a little more sensitive and therefore a little easier to trip to get your signal to the central station. Okay, so just if you're having a hard time, you can always come to this page as well. And this is what you would see, right? If I hit the start button, it will say, hey, the glass break is put into test mode for 15 minutes, arm the panel to away, and so forth. So you'll select OK, right? So after 15 minutes, it goes back to regular or the sensitivity level that you set it through programming. And then panel motion detector, which I mentioned just previously. Through the same page, I enable panel motion detector. Again, this goes into the next zone, right? So this just falls in sequential order to the next zone on the panel. Now, this cannot be manipulated like the glass break can. So you can change the sensor name if you want to, and if you can turn on chimes if you want to, but don't suggest that because every time someone walks in front of the panel, it's going to talk. And then, of course, sensor group, right? So there, you cannot change a sensor group. It is a 25 always, meaning that it is activity or event triggered type of motion only. Okay, so be mindful of that. It is not a real, PIR security motion. So hit save, and that falls into the next zone. IQ remote. If you can tell from this picture, this is very, very different from the other IQ remotes that we have had. You can tell just by the design. And guess what's not on the side? All of the ports. So there is no micro USB on the side. There is no headphone jack on the side. There's no volume button on the side. There's not even a camera, a little tiny camera up here on the right hand corner. And let's see if I have another picture. Nope, not another picture. Let me go back. So it is a bit thicker, however, but it is a bit thicker for a good reason. The plastic is way different. It is a design by us. There's simply a button on the side. We still have the back plate. However, it's a new back plate, and this new back plate also covers and will mount to a gang box. So big time bonus. The panel camera is also upgraded. It's now a 5 megapixel camera, just like the panel camera, and it has a very good wide angle lens, and it is in the middle of the screen rather than off to the side. So this is something we did. This is paving the way for future awesome qualsessness. This has horsepower and horsepower for days and processing power. So just very, very awesome chipset. Reliability and so forth. And because of that, we moved this way because we want to do more, right? We want to do more with the chipset. We want to do more with the remote. The new part number, for those that do not know, is the QW9104. And Kevin can correct me if you guys message him, but I'm pretty confident. So QW9104-840. QW9104-840, which is the new part number. I don't think you actually can get the other one anymore. They're gone. This is the newest version. So, but yeah, just way better. And the processing power and everything is paving the way for more future cool things to do with the remote. There's been a mega demand for getting Skybell and video from the panel or from the device over to the remote as well. Before that was literally impossible. We just did not have the capabilities. Now more possible, but it of course comes down to software and time and resources. So that is something we would or are looking into, and we would like to sometime down the road. But that is just a glimpse of things that we would like to do and things that we can do now because of this new remote, right? So getting into pairing. If you notice, there's a new icon on the screen. This only exists if you have software version 2.3.0 on both devices. Okay, so just beware. If you don't see this, it's because either one of your devices does not have the latest software version. But this is a test, so this is very cool. So before we did not have this. So test being, I can select test on my devices, and before I ever pair it to the panel or mount it on a wall, I must make sure they're connected to the same Wi-Fi network, however, and my panel and or remote will tell me if it is a good location and if it has adequate signal and pathway back to the panel before I ever put it on the wall. So very cool, not getting yourself in a jam and running all this wire and then come to find out, oh, it's actually a little bit too far away and it keeps dropping off. Well, know that before you put it on the wall now. So if you can, before you put them on the wall, or put the remote on the wall at least, you can put them on the table and get the remote and the panel updated so they are in sync with each other. And then, of course, run a test button, right? You'll have to unpair them, hit the test button. Yeah, choose an adequate location. So pairing them is pretty straightforward. You have, of course, you need to make sure that they are on the same network. Um, and then essentially, once they're on the same network, it's kind of like WPS. You hit pair on the panel, you hit pair on the remote, and they will find each other. And if they don't the first time, do it again. They will find each other, and then the remote will populate with the panel's screen, like mirror image pretty much. And then, of course, you'll see here on the panel that you now have a device paired to it. If they ever drop off, it's very simple for a customer as well. If you had a power outage or something on the remote itself, they'll see a rediscover or reconnect button that they can do themselves. Now, usually, the remote and panel will connect back together once they find, the connection again and find themselves on the network. But for whatever reason, if that is not happening in a timely manner, then of course you can kind of force a reconnect, and the customer can do that as well. So, excuse me. And so a few extra things I wanted to talk about right before we got into kind of the tail end here about troubleshooting and so forth, is a few call outs on key programming fields. One of those being under the installation or dealer settings, there is supervision time. It's very important to understand and know how supervision works. Supervision being, your device is going to check in, and it's based on device, right? So I can't say for a 345 device, for example, what their sensors are built like, and how often they check in and how many packets and so forth. But to understand kind of how this works, you kind of need to know a little bit about the device, being that my device checks in every hour or so forth with this many packets. This is basically on the panel side. You have, and the reason why I'm calling this one out specifically for the life safety devices is because per UL, okay, if you want this to be a UL certified install, this needs to be set to 4 hours, which by default out of the box, it is set to 4 hours. That means that your panel only has a 4-hour window before it's going to issue like a loss of supervision, okay, for that device. So just be aware if you have a device that's kind of, and you can tell pretty easily, if you have a smoke or life safety device that is, it said went offline, came back online, went off, and like very close to each other, then you know that you can change this. So if, we would suggest, try changing it to 24 hours. It essentially just gives the panel more time to receive all the packets from that device, therefore not issuing an unnecessary loss of supervision because someone happened to turn the microwave on or whatever at the same time. That, random things happen. Everyone knows that, right? So just be aware. So I wanted to call that out because that can be something useful for you if you see that happening, right? The other is open close report allow for auto learn. It's kind of a mouthful, but basically what that means is it is enabled by default. When you put your panel into auto learn mode for sensor programming, that means, excuse me, any sensor that is being tripped on that frequency will pop up on the panel. So that can be kind of a pain in the bum, especially on, devices that are already mounted. If you are one that mounts your devices first, and then pairs them, which is, there's no right or wrong way, really. Someone that puts them on the table and someone that mounts them first. Everyone has their own opinion, I guess. But sometimes it's a pain in the butt because you're walking in front of course, a motion sensor to get to the door, right? So you can disable that. If that is disabled, then only a tamper would pop up on the panel. That would also eliminate any random signal from perhaps the neighbor or a kid walking through the basement and so forth, and hitting a device right when you're on your way to trip the front door. So these I won't mention. We already talked about the panel glass break detector and panel motion. We went through those and how those are programmed. Siren and alarms. Under this setting, I just wanted to talk real quick about the difference between siren, turning a siren off versus it being on versus installer test mode, because there is a difference between off and installer test mode, not just the timer, but for all sirens off, if your installer or you are in a home and you are, okay, well, I'm installing this and it's super late and I don't want them to interfere or wake any children or anything like that, then I'm going to turn all sirens off. Well, not thinking about it, when we turn all sirens off, we will actually force fire siren back on for liability and to save you and life safety and so forth. Another one that Tams came in here and gave me a high five. So Mark is shouting out to everyone.
What's up, guys?
Mark Bateman. Sure, thanks. So for anyone that knows Mark, just everyone can send him an email real fast and flood his email. Yeah. Give him something to do. So the difference is installer test mode really actually turns all the sirens off. We're going to flip them all back on for you in 30 minutes, right? So that you're not screaming siren in a house. All sirens off. They're technically all off. Police and medical are off, but we force fire back on. Okay, so just be aware of that. We've had phone calls where technicians called in and said, I've turned the sirens all off, and every time I trip my smoke detector and it's waking everyone and blah blah blah, and the siren's still going on. Well, using installer test mode, that'll turn everything off. We'll flip it back on in 30 minutes because that's what you want. But the off is gonna it's life safety, right? So we want to protect everyone. If smoke is going to go off, of course, we want it to notify. So the other is security and arming. One that, so auto stay, that's pretty not self-explanatory, I guess, but the way we word it is, if anyone's familiar with the old Simon panels, we call it, or they call it, unvacated premise. So meaning that if you do not open an entry-exit contact or door or entry point, then it's going to revert to stay mode, right? So that's pretty common. The other that's not so common actually, and an experience is arm stay no delay. So by default, us Qualsys on our panel, when you arm to stay, we immediately arm the panel to stay. This is not the norm for some other systems, right? They of course they do things differently. So some always have a delay, and really it comes down to, again, customer education, and the way they have been trained or were trained before, which is kind of not so bueno when you think about it. The way I think of it is whether they have it's like we've always trained on if they have emotion or if they don't have emotion, right? But to a customer, it shouldn't matter, really. This is a way you're leaving, and this is you're staying, whether you have emotion or not, or whether the panel does anything different. The difference is being able to tie events and it actually means something. Away is different than stay, of course, right? So in the past, the way it's always been is, oh, well, you don't have emotion anyway, so it doesn't matter. I'm not going to even teach you about away because it doesn't matter. Just use stay all the time. Whoop-de-doo. And so they get accustomed to that, right? And then we've had people call and say, hey, I have this problem. Your panel's really being goofy. And what's happening is whenever my customer hits stay, like 30 seconds or a minute after they leave the home, they get a phone call that their alarm is going off, and we can't figure out why. Well, the reason is to the customer, right? They're hitting stay, not knowing that our panel is arming immediately to stay, and then they're opening the garage door or the front door, and what's happening? It's beeping, right? So to them, that's normal because they're thinking, okay, cool, well, I've got 60 seconds to leave the house. But that beeping is actually the entry delay. So now the entry delay is going to end after the delay, right? So 30 seconds or whatever you have it set for, and 30 seconds is going to go into alarm. So, you know, it's mostly for those customers that have had security in the past and they were kind of trained differently, or their system worked in a different way, or you know, whatever. So just make sure they understand the difference and how IQ panel works. Again, by default, it's enabled. You can disable that if that's part of your. You know, I spoke to someone the other day on the East Coast, and part of their business is, hey, we're using a template, and I actually want that disabled all the time. So that means they will always have a delay uh, for both arming states, right? So both stay and away. So user management, adding codes. We have 242 codes. 3 of those, of course, duress code, installer code, master code, and the rest are user guests. So 239 codes. So especially, you know, kind of, I've always joked about this, like, why? Well, I don't know, just because we can. But now with UL 1610 and commercial and PowerG and partitions, you know, and all these things, now we can merit. Now, this is why we have 239 codes. Oh, well, because we put the IQ panel in commercial, situation. So all the codes under the sky you have at your fingertips now. About section, just very good page to find information regarding battery life, what software version you're on, the hardware. You know, what is your hardware revision? You can even check under hardware the serial number to know if your panel will support a 7-volt power supply, right? Cellular, this is another place you can find the IMEI. You can actually find the IMEI in 4 or 5 different places on our panel. So on the box, on the back of the panel, on the SIM card, on a sticker next to the SIM card, under the cellular contact information, under this, I mean, it's all over the place. So don't worry, it is there. You can find it. Great place for information. Okay, so we've got, quick check-in here, 25 minutes. So this is good. So I'm going to spend 25 minutes on some testing and tools. And then we're going to leave it open here for a little bit for any of those that still have questions coming in and want to continue chatting. Maybe they're having a great conversation with Jason and or Kevin and talking about boats and summertime and sunshine. I mean, who knows? Keeping them busy over there. So we'll keep it open for a little bit more afterwards, probably 10 minutes or so. So let's get in, excuse me, testing and tools real quick. And talk about a few things. Some are very, very cool. Most are they're all very, very cool, let's be honest. But we have a whole slew of tests, right? From Wi-Fi tests, PowerG tests, Z-Wave, image sensor, cell tests, so forth. So I'm going to call out a few of them. Wi-Fi test, I don't usually go over this too much, but this is not, just so you're aware, like a Ookla download test, right? Speedtest.net. This is a local network test to the local router, right? That local network connection. Okay, so be aware of that. But just because this says 97 megabytes does not mean that you're having some blazing fast internet here. Okay, it is local. So we are developing, so tidbit for roadmap, more of a network diagnostics page that may replace this page, but it will be much more in depth and actually show if you've ever had like a diagnostic analytic tool for Wi-Fi on your phone app, very, very neat. So we're doing something like that. Okay, so sensor test. So on the sensor test page, you will see any of your legacy devices like Frequent 319, 345, 433, and you'll see those devices. And then you'll see all these numbers, right? So you'll see average dBm and last event, all of that stuff until you actually get in to like the graph. This stuff kind of doesn't make any sense. For reference, also, we now send this information to alarm.com also. So we send it we send signal information, and every home is different. So it's actually has a big algorithm thing to it where it's, based on the noise floor and where, the sensor plots itself, X amount of dBm above the noise floor, then it is excellent, or it is good, or fair, or whichever. So we're actually able to send some information to alarm.com now. And we're sending Z-Wave link quality also to alarm.com. So very cool. That's 231. This is 230. So Anyway, so none of that stuff kind of makes sense to me, or would make sense to you if you don't kind of know the graph and how that works. But this is, of course, all your sensor names, the packets and so forth. What I wanted to call out, so you see this little cog. Um, if you hit the settings cog, you'll see a clear all sensor data, which is good. If you've got a lot of information, you're kind of doing some troubleshooting, you can turn it off, clear the data, start over. And then you have this real-time noise floor that I mentioned before. So this is actually a moving page. If you pull this up on your panel, you will see these dots chart across the page, like moving. Um, and if you, for example, were to crumple, if you had the antenna in your hand and you held it so it's, flat and it's nice and it's hanging down. If you then grab that antenna and manipulated it and crumpled it up, you'll see this graph change in real time. So we're measuring this. It's very cool. The frequency or noise level in the home. So by crinkling this antenna, you'll see this drop, therefore not having good signal and therefore being more susceptible to a higher, essentially creating a higher noise floor, right? Because you have less signal strength to the panel. So and then if you hit, so I'll go back to, so if you hit this little graph next to one of your sensors, you then show up with this page. So you have these dots, these green or whatever color dots, right, depending on your frequency, and then of course two lines, a red and a yellow or orange line. The red line is essentially your noise floor, right? It's that previous page, it's that real-time noise floor that's plotted on this static chart here. And what happens is these green dots are all your activation and all your events, right? So open, close, supervision, and so forth, excuse me, tamper. These are all the events coming from the sensor. So they're plotting themselves on the graph because every time that is sent, we also send the dBm level, the signal strength. And then we're referencing this in regards to the noise level. So when you think about, a home and what it's been in the past, it is, not having something like this has been, it's definitely cost everyone money. It's cost everyone money because we've never been able to see, and just like the very simple Tech 101 to why isn't something working is the power cycle. Well, Tech 101 to why my sensor does not have range is I'm going to put a $150 repeater in and cross my fingers and hope that fixed it, right? Because we can't see, because we can't know. We don't know. All we get is a very simple, does it chime or does it beep 3 times or not? And that's usually based on packets and so forth, which can be not so consistent, or I can't remember the word, but this is now we're actually able to show you. And what happens is before you ever leave a home, so this information gathers in the background, but before you ever leave a home, you can reference this page and you can cycle through next, the next sensor, and make sure all of your activations are in the green. Because as they dip lower, because they might be further away, they might have a lower battery, right? So therefore, two things that are going to contribute to lesser signal strength. And then perhaps just, bogus sensor, or it's on a metal door, all these different things, right? Or the way your antenna is facing. But if these green dots are trailing closer or down by the yellow line, that is the, ooh, I probably should think about, okay, that's the garage door. Yep, I know where that is. I should probably think about putting a repeater or changing the orientation or moving it, or maybe switching it out and getting a different device, like a PowerG device, right? That's not going to have that type of signal issue. So really this page is showing you before you ever leave if you could have a problem with the sensor, because you're in a home. How many times does a tech test a sensor? 2 times. I trip it into the panel, it worked. I tripped it while it's on the door and it sent a signal, it worked. Have a nice day, Mrs. Johnson. Everything works fine. 2 days later, Mrs. Johnson says it doesn't work, right? So being able to know, Ms. Johnson probably had a sensor that was in the yellow, right, or closer to the red, because at that point the noise floor, the sensor signal and so forth, then is so weak that the panel is unable, or the noise floor is just that much higher, right? The interference in the home, therefore unable to tell the difference between white noise, the kind of noise in the home, and the sensor saying open or closed. So reference this page. It's so good. It's so helpful. Make sure every tech does it. Go here. Hold them to, you need to have everything in the green before you leave the home, right? It's very important. It's going to save you. It's going to save everyone. It creates less headaches. Your customer is satisfied because things are working, and so forth. So the next one is PowerG. PowerG is a little different. We can't get the same information as we can with traditional sensors, but we do have some great tools as well with PowerG. So PowerG being a two-way device, we can ping. We can actually send a command out to the sensor and say, "Hey, give me back your signal strength," and it will tell us if it is either strong, good, poor, or no signal. Okay. Now, there are also something that's very cool. Before you ever mount a PowerG device or put a PowerG device on a wall or a door, is you can check the signal strength before you ever do that, right? And that's because every PowerG device has an LED on it. And when you tamper a PowerG device, it will go, it will go into a test mode, or a quote range test or walk test, whatever you want to call it. But essentially this test mode, where then when you open or close the device or trip it or activate it, you'll see a red blink for transmission or activation, and then it will be followed by three other blinks of a different color. For example, three green blinks is strong, right? Three yellow blinks is then good, essentially pass. Three yellow blinks is still okay. And then, of course, a red blink is no bueno. So before you ever put something, you can pair it to the panel, walk forever away, and do your open and close. And of course, you might not be able to hear the panel chime because you're far away or in another room, but you'll actually be able to see on the device itself if you're going to have good signal strength or not. Okay. Z-Wave, I think this is, let me check here. I think this is pretty much, yeah, this is pretty much the end. Yep, okay, so we're ending on Z-Wave. So Z-Wave devices, again, make sure you understand Z-Wave. You can't just add a device and assume that it's just creating a network all on its own. You have to add multiple devices. Z-Wave is a type of network where it requires and should have more devices. More with Z-Wave, it really is more the merrier. You have a stronger network, a more efficient network when you have more devices, because they communicate off and through each other. So they'll bounce around like a spider web and choose the most efficient path. Each time you say front door unlock or back door unlock, it'll choose the quickest and most efficient path. So if I only had three devices, right? If I had this panel and then a Z-Wave device and then my lock, and I move the middle guy, then my lock's kind of SOL sitting out there on, all by its own, and I'm not getting any, signal to that lock. It's now, it doesn't have the middleman, the repeater anymore. So that's the whole point. You can see how this diagram changed, where now just because I removed that thermostat, although I have all these other devices, my lock isn't out there on its own, not communicating anymore, because it has and can see other neighbors to then route through to get back to the panel, right? So you want to make sure you have enough repeating devices. Repeating devices with Z-Wave is anything that is a constantly powered device, not by battery, plugged in or screwed into an outlet or to a light switch, whatever you want to call it. A thermostat that actually has a C wire, those devices will work as a repeating Z-Wave device. So now to check and to verify you have a good network, or to troubleshoot as well, we have, for example, Rediscover Network, which I mentioned before. You'll want to do this anytime you move or change, add or delete a Z-Wave device. Hit the top, you can see highlighted here, right? If you hit the top one, it'll actually auto-select everything, and then you can hit Rediscover, and it will do all of them. Now, of course, depending on how many devices you have is going to depend on how long this rediscovery is going to take, right? You can do that remotely from alarm.com as well. Z-Wave test neighbor info. this is a good one. This is, Mrs. Johnson called. My lock isn't working anymore. And I mean, you have it on the alarm.com list that there was some repeating lamp module in the middle in the hallway that went to the panel, and so it shouldn't have a problem. Well, I can view either on the panel or from alarm.com that lock's neighbor. And lo and behold, my lock now says, oh, it doesn't actually see any neighbors. And so therefore you can call out Miss Johnson and say, Miss Johnson, what did you do with that plug that was in the wall? And Miss Johnson says, oh, well, I moved it because either, I didn't like how it looked. It doesn't go with my cabinet or my hutch or whatever is there. And I actually wanted my bedroom light to turn on. So I put it over there, but that's actually not working either. But they were working before. Well, there you go, right? Because they need each other. You're trying to create this network, right? So, um, so this is how you view those neighbor info, right? The next one is counters. This is kind of this mathematical, you can see how many commands were sent, how many passed, how many didn't pass. She says, hey, only half the time it actually works. I send it, and so I can see through alarm.com or through the panel, oh, she actually sent this command 100 times, but there's only 50 passes or something, right? So that is an inefficient network, of course. You need to have like 98%. So you want to change things, move some things around. Maybe you should move that lock again, or that plug-in module, put another one in, get a higher pass rate, and therefore have a happier Mrs. Johnson, right? Last one is on Z-Wave. Is very similar to the sensor test page, which is never before, but can now actually see the network, right? Once again, an invisible frequency type and communication protocol that you've never been able to see, but now we're bringing it out for you. So this is a picture of my home. Actually, it's taken from my panel. And so I know all these devices, right? So you can see, I'm not going to go into all kinds of crazy detail, but you can see I have devices repeating off other devices, right? That's what these double nodes, these double black circles are. And it's quite the little spider web. But a lot of times, they're going straight to the panel. There's a few kind of on the outskirts. And then you'll see excuse me, dotted lines versus solid lines and so forth. A dotted line is a normal signal, which is fine. Now, I know, because of my home, that these dotted lines are actually legacy Z-Wave devices. They're 300 series. And I know that the devices, for example, upstairs thermostat is an alarm.com thermostat, which is Z-Wave Plus, right? My front entry lamp, which is a Qualcomm IQ outlet, is also Z-Wave Plus, and so forth, right? So I know that those devices, Z-Wave Plus, have a much stronger signal and better range, right? The other ones that you'll see, my front door lock is actually, it says inactive or unreachable. I know that it's unreachable because it was dead at the time I took the screenshot. The thermometers are alarm.com thermometers at the time. Excuse me, those are inactive because they have to be awake to rediscover the network. So you have to ping them and so forth. So, but that is a little bit. Now, this is based on last working route. Okay, so this will, when you run a rediscovery or you send, a command, front door unlock or whatever, this is that last route that it took. This is not a static, it's always going to be this way because, of course, Z-Wave is going to find the most efficient route to through another device to the panel or maybe straight to the panel, right? So it is based on that. So again, being able to see these things before you ever leave a home, and know, okay, whoop, I have a device that actually has a weak signal. I'm going to address that before I ever leave, instead of, well, it worked the 2 times that I tested it, so I'm just going to go with that, right? That's not how. Should not do that, right? Just like put a little more into it. Reference these tools that we've given. Save yourself from truck rolls and so forth, right? So last one is panel test page. in the system tests. You can run all, you can run one individually, but it's similar to, the alarm.com system check, except it's on the panel. It does all the hardware stuff. It checks the video player and it sounds a siren and it does all the hardware things. It arms and disarms the panel and all that. Kind of looks like it's possessed because it's, running through all these scenarios, but it runs through this nice check, right? These nice tests. So, lastly, everyone is, I want to go to support. Please feel free, dealers.qualsys.com. You do not have to register to actually be a dealer per se, but you can register for portal access. And there's just so much information. There's web trainings, there's announcements and flyers and web assets and tons of training. We have an LMS, a learning management system. So if you want to send technicians or you want to do it yourself and go through an actual training like program, certification, you're watching videos and answering questions, you do a test, and at the end you get this nice certificate and so forth. So feel free to do that. We have that on there as well. Dealers.qualsys.com, right? Click register. Technical support, we are 8 to 8, Monday to Friday at 855-4-QUALSYS. Or feel free to reach out, tech support at qualsys.com. That it goes through a ticketing service as well, not just some random person that doesn't answer their email. It is actually managed, and it's through a ticketing service. And us, the technical account managers and trainers, and our technical support as well, tier 3, and all those people, we all reference and look at that and manage that also. So we are able to view that and assist when needed. So please feel free to use all of this information. Lastly is we have a couple emulators. So whether it's an iOS or Android app, find it at our website. If you just go to qualsys.com, scroll to the very bottom, it'll say try our emulator. Feel free, use those, download them. Now, the Android and the iOS app are more on the front-facing customer side. They do not go into the panel settings for technical support, for example. If you use the web-based emulator, it will go into a few more menus and some settings and so forth, so you can use that. But just so you know, those are out there and those are yours to use and they are available and free. So having said all that, Q&A, you should appreciate your time today. Everyone that has been on, there have been just a whole giant boatload today. So it sure is appreciated. Again, thank you for being attentive and using Qualsys or wanting to learn about Qualsys. Again, dealers.qualsys.com. If you're on there, sign up, be on the mailing list, find the next webinar or web training, web conference, whatever you want to call it, and stay up to date. We have updates regularly. ISC is coming up, so be sure to come find us at ISC. We are on social media, have our own pages and so forth. If you have technical questions, you can take them there. Also, use the community, right? Again, thank you. My name is Jeremy. Sure appreciate it. And Kevin and Jason as well. And we'll leave it open for, another 5 or 10 minutes, depending on your questions. So if they're coming in, we'll stay on. But feel free to chat in anything you might have. So have a wonderful day. Enjoy the week. And we'll catch you on the next one. So thanks so much.